But anyway, yeah, I want to talk to you about Sora. Like
And
I saw
probably the
this
rabbit thing too, and yeah, a couple other
and the
stuff.
rabbit
Yeah,
thing. Oh, did you see the rabbit? Did you finally take a look at that?
yeah. I watched that video last night, I think.
Uh,
Yeah, last night at some point, and then I watched some of the Sora stuff. Now I had seen Sora before, obviously. I think everybody that is like paying even a little bit of attention to it. But yeah, I started looking through that video, and I hadn't seen some of the newer stuff, which is it's wild. Yeah, Sora is how do I put it? Like Sora is absolutely what I expected to happen, and at the same time, it's still shocking how quickly this is building on itself. You know,
yeah.
like I can say intelligently that AI is moving at this in insane rapid speed, right? But then there's like this kind of thing where there's like knowing something intellectually and then experiencing and seeing it and like breathing that in, that like holy shit, this is here already, is like a different thing, you know.
Mm. Like
It's a really weird analogy, all right, super weird analogy, but this is a true story. So my father was fairly homophobic growing up, right? And not homophobic in the sense of like, you know, like he hated gay people or anything, right? It's just like everything was gay, you know, there's fucking Smear the Queer was a great game. It's just a typical Gen Xer, you know, like, you know what I mean, right? Like not like he was like actually like, you know, ready to beat gay people up in a bathroom or something, but
I hear
certainly
you.
uncomfortable and like forcing a lot of those kind of tropes onto me,
Mhm.
which is fine. I never cared. But I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't understand it. Like because it's like I intellectually I got it, but I was like, my dad's a smart guy. Like he's not a bad guy. Like what's with this stupidity, right? And even in middle school, I had like gay friends because I was really into choir, and in high school I went into show choir. So obviously I had a fuck ton of gay friends. Like because it was like me, two straight dudes, and then like 19 gay dudes, and then all girls, right? That's what show choir is. But anyways,
Mhm.
so in middle school, I didn't get it. You know, I was like, it didn't make sense to me. And we had like the gay straight alliance kind of starting to show up. And then there was this time where I was in ninth grade, and I was in the musical in ninth grade, like for like a backup, you know, singing, dancing piece, you know, for, I was in Grease, the musical. Right. And so I was there for
Mhm.
practice, but I'm like, this is very beginning of freshman year in high school. Right. So like high school is this big place with all these like grown kids, you know what I mean? It's like, it's daunting as a ninth grader. Right. And then especially
Mhm.
after school, or whatever. And this guy came in who was a year older than me, a year ahead of me. And we ended up becoming really good friends actually. Um, his name is Troy. Obviously, not give his full name, but his name is Troy. And of course, he joined the Navy. His name is Troy, and you know, black, flamboyantly homosexual gay man
Mm.
comes in and does a runway walk. With each step, he snaps a finger. Okay, so it's and he is saying a syllable, right? It's like he's saying a syllable with each. So it's dot 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 da, right? And he has on a T-shirt that says "I heart dick," and he goes in and because it's after school, and like the drama teacher didn't really give a fuck, right? As long as you didn't
Yeah.
wear it during school, he was okay with it. But I wasn't expecting
Yeah.
any of this. And he goes, "I have arrived," and just open arms does this thing, and with this "I heart dick" shirt. And it was in that moment I was like, I get it, Dad. I get it. I understand now. Like I like it took that moment for me to be like, oh, like this is the shit that makes you super uncomfortable and weirded out and like makes you like strange and like kind of insulting. It's like, oh, okay, because like everything that I knew at that point was purely academic, you know. I feel kind of the same. I know this is a weird parallel, but I feel the same way about AI, right? Like I get it, and I'm like, I totally understand it, and then like, and then it happens, and you're like, oh, fuck, like it's here,
Yeah.
you know. And it's the difference between like knowing and experiencing is often leaps and bounds.
The like watching Sora like for the first because like um like I was it Marquise Brown, right, that big YouTuber. um he had like dropped a video. I didn't like look at it, I just saw it in my recommends about like AI video has like just like had a revolution or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't feel like clicking on it, and so I didn't. And then I saw like an image or a still image here or there. People were talking about something. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't focus on it until I saw a news story, and I'm like, oh yeah, I this is something I need to be watching. And
Yeah. I saw it was based off Dolly, and I went, oh shit. Okay, I need to look at this.
mm,
Like I saw
yeah,
the thing too, it was like video AI on like Twitter or something. I was like, ah, whatever. And then I saw another
yeah,
post, and it was like utilizing the framework of Dolly, and I was like, oh, okay, because Dolly is the one that like where you had
the pictures.
all the Pixar film, the fake Pixar film. Have you seen all of
Oh yeah,
those?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
where they make like a Mein Kampf Pixar movie, and it's like an Auschwitz, and it like looks like a Disney movie about Auschwitz, or it's like or like
Um,
like one of like a woman tattooed with all her aborted babies. It's like you see conservatives making these wild Disney film
oh my
Pixar
god.
things through Dolly, but it just showcased the technology that like even the
Uh,
craziest concept could be turned instantly into like what
mm,
legitimately looks like a Disney film movie poster. Um, and it was like so once I saw Dolly was involved, I was like, oh, that's Google's technology that's really good with images, way better than way better at emulating other things, I would say, right? Like as like specific things than like Mid Journey or
mm,
all of these Dolly clones, etc. Like they're great for making images, but
mm,
Dolly is certainly been um has been doing a lot. And so, yeah, so when I saw Sora came out with that, and then I clicked on it and I was like, oh, this is super impressive. And then I saw like the movie trailer thing with like the
mm,
blonde dude with the blue eyes. And I was
yeah.
like, that's not a
Mm.
fucking human. That's an AI generated fucking Aryan dude with a randomly a sweater knit hat on for some reason.
Yeah.
But I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. So yeah, the rabbit thing to me is not really that impressive. I think that's a gimmick,
Well, I
personally.
think after now, I sent that to you like 2 weeks ago, and
Hmm.
now in comparison to everything else, I think maybe it doesn't grab attention. But like I thought that was actually pretty interesting. Like the ability to schedule, the ability to take in natural language,
Mm,
and like put it all together into a meaningful set of actions, right? Like
right.
once it like has access to your accounts, I think that's pretty like amazing for
Yeah.
animations. Yeah.
So like here some I was thinking about this the other day, right? Because I do a lot of thinking about AI. When you shower thoughts, all around. And like one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
things I understand is like, I was like, why the fuck haven't we had um so many human resources and people in offices? How have they not already been fired? Right? It's like I was perplexed. I was like, because like I've seen the technology and I've seen what the technology can do in like what is it? What is Office's one? Open Office? I can't remember the name of it.
Copilot,
Copilot.
Microsoft
Thank you,
Copilot.
Microsoft
Yeah.
Copilot. I've seen Copilot, and businesses are now able to buy licenses for Copilot. And so I'm like,
Mm.
in what world would you not spend a couple grand or even 100 grand for the rights to use Copilot and then fire fucking 10, 15, 20% of your staff in like in office work? Like it just doesn't financially, like I understand like
Yeah,
empathy, whatever. If you're
I
like,
get you.
you're a good
Yeah,
person, maybe you don't want to fire loyal people, etc. You know what I mean? But I
yeah.
mean, and even if that's the case, right? If you're that good person, you should still grab this technology and then put those people towards tasks that used to not be profitable that now we can put humans on, right? Like, because
Hmm.
every company, big company, anyways, has like a bunch of shit on the back burner that like they kind of canned it because it was not viable, right? And like because it costs too much fucking money. But if it takes 10% of the manpower that it used to, all of a sudden, it's not really waste of money to put 2 employees on something that you might have had to have put 20 employees on before. And so I'm like, why the fuck isn't this being done? And it dawned on me is that AI is moving too fast to invest. It is moving faster than the rate of capitalism, right? Which is that capitalism is looking at prices in the market and trying to adjust to the market mechanism and things like that. And what it says is this suite is going to save me this amount of money if I buy it for this amount of money now. But if I wait 2 months, what will replace it will be so much better. And so the capitalists are not investing in this technology because they know that the technology is in its infancy, and that every time they commit, because I mean, if you've ever worked in an
Every
office,
time
you
they
know,
fucking blink. Yeah.
right? It's like, you know, if you've worked in an office, that like it takes a while to like train office staff, especially like boomers and shit, right? On like new technology. So if I train an entire office on Microsoft Copilot, and then Microsoft comes out with something totally different in 6 months that's radically better, I've just wasted all of this money training people on this tool that's supposed to save me money to adopt this tool, and now I have to do it again and train people again. And so I've realized that's why this hasn't, it's crazy to think, but honestly it's moving faster than the entrepreneurs and the businessmen and the capitalists will adopt it.
So I agree with that analysis. I mean, I think that like some people are just holding their fire on this one. One, I don't think there's like, for people who like you and me who've been trying to follow this, gotta get our heads around these things, right? Like our minds are on this thing in the way that like most individuals, right, capitalist
Right.
businessmen, who are busy with running the
Yeah.
business and everything else in life, aren't
Stable
focused on
company, they have a way of doing things, right? And change is scary
exactly.
because
Yeah,
change always means risk. And
yeah.
risk is something that stable, well-founded companies are not doing. Yes, so it seems like I was wrong, right? And I can admit this now. It seems like I was wrong that large companies are going to adopt these systems quickly, and it's going to evaporate large portions of the job market. What it looks like, the more I look at it, is that competition is going to start arising from smaller firms of young people that understand how to use and utilize this technology, that are going to be able to outperform these old companies that are slow to adopt, because it's, as Max Weber kind of put, right, like the problems, all of the problems that are inherent with bureaucracy, middle management, you can't middle manage a technology moving this fast. And so what it looks
Yeah.
like is you're going to have new insurance companies with like 30 people with like mommy and daddy, with like daddy's yacht money, and like a bunch of tech gurus that are going to come into the market and beat insurance companies with 400, 500, 600 employees.
So I worked a previous corporate type job, and
Mm-hmm.
like their processes were so. I mean, like, well, we were on. Uh, Fuck. What was before Windows 10? I'm blanking now. What was the version of it
Vista,
before Windows 10? Was
Vista
it
or
Vista?
XP.
Not XP. Not XP. Fuck.
There was XP and then there was
XP.
Vista, and but like a lot
XP
of people
Vista
didn't
7.
adopt Vista because Vista
Yeah,
sucked,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah,
went
yeah.
seven.
But like, no, it was like
Technically went
Windows.
seven,
I
then
think.
Windows 8, then Windows 10. But Windows
Yeah,
8 very
yeah, yeah,
quickly
yeah,
went to Windows 10.
yeah, yeah.
I think I made you. I
I
think I just showed my age by saying XP. I had
Yeah.
XP for a very
It's
long
like,
time.
yeah,
You're like, XP? Who the fuck?
95? Was
No.
it 95? I don't know,
Exactly
man.
what that means. But a transformer is basically
But no,
something that makes
the
AI
point is
better.
that they were several generations behind in terms of their computing, right? So I was like doing their IT, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were several generations behind. And I remember like the process of switching over, it started like just as I showed up. I was like, fuck, I wish I had missed this. Like hire me like a few months after this, because like it was also a pain just getting people up to speed.
Right.
I think they were actually using XP when I first started there, if I remember correctly. And
Right.
then they
Yeah.
went to
Because
7.
XP was honestly better than Vista, and the only difference between 7 and XP was better than 7. The difference between XP and 7, though, is that 7, I believe, was the jump in memory usage. So like that was the jump from programs only being able to use like 8 megabytes of memory to like 16 gigabytes, and that didn't matter for like most office work and programs, but it mattered a lot for like gaming, editing, video work, processes that took a lot of stuff. I could
Well,
be
I
wrong,
mean,
but I'm pretty sure that's when the jump was.
so XP and I think 7 was actually better than XP. Had like a lot of advantages, but like in terms of an immediate, so you're right
Mm-hmm.
in terms of basic office functions where there's no need to make the jump immediately, right?
Well,
But
7.
what we were running into at some point were compatibility issues.
Yeah,
There were,
it's the difference between Android and iPhone, honestly.
Mm.
7 is kind of like iPhone, and Android is kind of like XP, in that, like, if you knew how to use XP, you could find out more information and you could do more with XP. Whereas 7 was like cleaner and easier to grasp and easier to train on and quicker to like figure out what you're doing. And that's kind of like the way iPhone is, right? Like iPhone, everybody knows that iPhone is slower than Android, their picture quality isn't as good as Android. Their memory usage isn't as good. Like they don't have a single thing. Are you there? Oh, sorry. You lagged
yeah, I'm
out.
sorry. Yeah.
They don't have a single thing that's as good as Android. And yet they have, other than brand recognition and loyalty, right? And the fact that, iPhone fucks up Android's photos over text. So people think Androids take bad photos because people are retarded. But like other than those things, what does iPhone have for it? And one of the big things that iPhone has beyond all those things is ease of use. It's like very easy to pick up an iPhone and learn how to use shit. Whereas like jailbreaking Androids can do so much more than an iPhone, but like that's for nerds.
Yeah. But I mean, well, part of it, again, well, from an IT perspective, is that like, from the automation standpoint, it was much easier to use 7.
Yeah,
right?
I could see that.
Running on that. So like on the back end, that's where we were running into issues. And so like I was there for the process of upgrading to 7. And oh my God, it's such a pain in the ass. But that's it, right? Like that level of effort of training, like you were saying, but it's also like
it's going to be bigger than that. I think a more apt description is, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I just real quick, it's going to be way bigger than one version of Windows to another. It's taking people from DOS to GUI, right? Like graphical user interface. That's that's the training difference, really, is like what we had to do in like the mid 90s. It's training fucking boomers who were, in their middle age.
And then there's integrating it into the business process. This is where I can connect it back to your previous point, right? Because like let's pretend that Microsoft Copilot is going to be like the height of it all until like for a few years, right? And that people know that, okay?
I think it will.
Even if that was
probably,
but even if that was the case, right? Like the process, like you're talking about re-engineering your business processes, right? And like you're saying, well, yes, there's going to be a whole new level of efficiency. But remember, businesses don't operate at like maximum efficiency, right? They operate like especially when we're talking about like small businesses and medium-sized businesses, like when they're building up, like there's like a way of doing things that just worked before, right? And they'll keep doing that until someone introduces like, hey man, this is dumb. Like we have to like sit down, have a meeting, re-engineer this, right? Maybe like fire a person.
Yeah, it's a give and take, right? Like if a business is constantly ready to change, that's a terrible business, right? Like if a business doesn't kind of like, it's kind of one of those situations like if it ain't broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If you're constantly trying to re-innovate from the ground up how your business is structured, you're going to waste massive amounts of money trying to do things and make all of these failures. And so, the more that I look at how fast this is developing and how slow big business is to respond, and the more I think about the kind of the nature of bureaucracy, the more I realize that like the future is not AAA studios using, like taking gaming as an example. The future isn't AAA studios using Unreal Engine 5.2 AI to build amazing games from the ground up. The future is Pal World. The future is small companies of a few people that are able to adapt to these quick changes because they're passionate and they care. And there's not these middlemen, or as what's his name? Steve Jobs used to call them. Have you ever seen the Steve Jobs interview where he discusses like what killed IBM?
No.
I'm going to pull it up because I think it's extremely important to this conversation. And it's one of the few times I have massive respect for Steve Jobs because a lot of what he did is just, yeah. I mean, like he is, but let me see if I can, I'm not going to pull the whole thing, but it's, I gotta find it real quick.
Yeah,
So
take
it's
your
like
time.
I want to say it's like somewhere in the middle. But I think this is like super relevant to what we're talking about.
They're the exact words that Paul Allen used.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. It was obvious.
I think it's here actually. I think I just found it out of instinct. Hold on.
And but there were two visits. You saw it, then you brought some people back with you.
Yeah.
And what happened this next time? They made you cool your heels for a while.
No.
No? Well, Adele Goldberg says otherwise.
What do you mean?
Well, she did the demo when that she argued against doing it
Okay, maybe not. It's in here somewhere. It's in this 5 minutes, I promise.
for 3
Oh, so you mean they were reluctant to show us the demo?
She was.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember that. No, I thought you meant something else.
So they were very skillful.
Yeah. But they did show us.
Yeah.
So, and it's good that they showed us because the technology crashed and burned at Xerox. I thought a lot about that. The first thing.
There it is. Fuck it. I accidentally clicked the wrong spot.
They were reluctant to show us the demo.
She was.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember that. No, I thought you
So here it is where he says the technology crashed and burned at IBM, right? Or Xerox, sorry.
meant something else.
So they were very skillful.
Yeah. But they did show us.
Yeah.
So, and it's good that they showed us because the technology crashed and burned at Xerox. I thought a lot about that, and I learned more about that with John Scully later on, and I think I understand it now pretty well. What happens is, like with John Scully, John came from PepsiCo, and they at most would change their product, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So if you were a product person, you couldn't change the course of that company very much. So who influenced the success of PepsiCo? The sales and marketing people. Therefore, they were the ones that got promoted, and therefore they were the ones that ran the company. Well, for PepsiCo, that might have been okay, but it turns out the same thing can happen in technology companies that get monopolies, like, IBM and Xerox. If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better copy or a better computer. So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people. And they end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products. Sort of the product sensibility and the product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. They have no conception of the craftsmanship that's required to take a good idea and turn it into a good product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers. So that's what happened at Xerox. The people at Xerox PARC used to call the people that ran Xerox toner heads. And these toner heads would come out to Xerox PARC and they just had no clue about what they were seeing.
And for our audience, toner is what?
Oh, toner is what you put into a copier. Yeah, the toner that you add to an industrial copier.
The black stuff.
The black stuff, yeah. So basically they were copier heads that just had no clue about a computer or what it could do. And so they just grabbed defeat from the greatest victory in the computer industry. Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry today. Could have been, a company 10 times its size. Could have been IBM. Could have been the IBM of the 90s. Could have been the Microsoft.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like it's a very poignant way of describing how some of these companies work, especially in like emergent technology, And I think like when discussing AI and AI rollout, right? I think and the companies and why I think AI is, I don't want to say doomed to fail, right? But like why I think AI is probably, the more I look at it, is less likely to be adopted by big companies is exactly that mindset, right? It's like the product people, the innovators are not running most of the large corporations in America. It's going to be the young buck tech guru, Gen Z crazy kid, autistic kid, right? With a couple of people in his basement that comes up with crazy shit that like just destroys the competition because they're just languishing behind.
So I Okay, so I agree with your overall point, but I disagree with the specific example you had used previously.
Which is what? I'm
Talking
sorry.
about, yeah, sure. We were talking about video games. You said
Mm,
specifically
okay.
AAA companies. And did you see the end of the video? Did you like actually like watch the whole thing through, or did you just like
No,
skip
no, no.
around?
I watched like some of it like while I was like cleaning up after my son before we like hopped on,
No
to
problem.
talk.
No problem. No problem. But at the very end, it
Hmm.
it, it like there's a message from an individual who I believe is working in Triple Games. That's what the impression I got. And they're talking about how already they've stopped hiring people who do 2D artwork and concept art. Concept artists, they're done with
Mm.
those. They've been
Because
integrating
concept art
AI.
is really only used as like I have an idea, a vague
Yeah,
conception, an idea that I want. Right. So like why hire this concept artist if
yeah.
the whole concept artist idea is to bring worded vision and what you're trying to reach into image base, into an image that can help us conceptualize it when AI can already do that. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
They specifically say that if we are looking for a specific style, it's just easier to train an AI on some artists, some established artists' style, than hire them.
Yeah, I've
They
done that
talk about
before.
like,
I've done
okay,
that
yeah,
before. Like, yeah, like where I when I was playing Pathfinder, there's a place where you can like put in your character portrait. And so I would just pick like a D&D like 1980s artist and then like
mm.
describe my character build and then have them do it in that style. And then instantly I had a portrait drawn like a 1985 advanced Dungeons and Dragons portrait from like one of those like books. And it would be like exactly match what my character was. Like it was like, I mean, cause it's why not? Like,
Yeah, and they also talked about how like they had been outsourcing from some foreign country. I forget, Indonesia or
mhm.
something. I don't remember. But anyway, that they were getting artwork that before would take a week. Now it's taking a few days, and it seems like because it was unclear the way they worded it, but it seems like the price has dropped. That like
Yeah, yeah.
whoever's
I
on
do
the other
wonder about
side is
that.
feeling
Like
the pressure,
some of the
and they're
things
making it
being
happen. Go ahead. Yeah.
outsourced. Yeah, no, I had not even thought of that like at all until you just now mentioned it.
Yeah.
What level of things are being outsourced to Indonesia, India, Bangladesh in terms of like phone operators and things that we're desperately trying to reduce manpower, where the entire business model is if we can reduce the cost of manpower, then we make more money. Well, what's a better way to reduce the cost of manpower than not hiring people in India for $2 an hour, but instead having a computer software system that can do. I mean, like the level of quality of like customer service representatives in India is like barely better than artificial intelligence. Like I'm pretty sure artificial intelligence
I
right
know.
now beats Comcast's customer service experience. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, actually, I do.
I'm not saying AI is the best or anything or that it's equal,
Yeah.
but it is better than Comcast. It has to be. And
Yeah,
so like if
and
Comcast, how
yeah.
much money is Comcast spending in their customer service call centers?
And you just
Half a
get rid
million
of
in?
them and you still have your level 2 techs, right? Like when there is like we were having an error, it can't figure out the issue. You have to escalate it. You
Right.
can
Then
change
eventually it goes
escalate
to a
to level
human
2.
that like actually knows what the fuck they're doing. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But like your entry level shit where they're all reading off a fucking script anyways.
All of them are reading. Oh my god, yes, they're all reading off scripts. All of them.
And it's like, hey, can you shut the fuck up? I already know steps 1 through 8 because I've had this problem 7 times and you've hung up on me. And then they're like, okay, sir, blah 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 blah. And then it's like, bitch, this is and then you're gonna say this, right? And then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, I know the script. Just transfer me to your boss. Like my problem is more complicated than that. Yeah, yeah, no, we're certainly on the edge of a revolution for without a doubt. And it is, I think the biggest shock to me isn't the speed at which things have developed. The biggest shock to me thus far has been how much this hasn't been adopted. And I've had to grasp with that. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was like the idea that like, I don't think big companies are going to pick this up fast enough in terms of their competition. My fear, and this is the libertarian speaking in me, right? My big fear is that large corporations, along with government agencies like the FBI and the CIA, NSA, Pentagon, etc., will fearmonger enough to regulate this so that only large corporations that are slow to adopt these things are going to be able to have full access and power to these. That there's going to be inordinate licensing fees and investigations that the government has to do to make sure you're responsible enough to use this technology that will price those small, young buck, started out of my basement people completely out of the market because they won't have the capacity to use the best technology. And it'll be companies like Microsoft selling open office with like all of these government and licensing agreements with these big companies with licenses that cost, a couple $1 million in order to purchase. I'm worried it'll be the same thing. So you ever heard of an ISDA?
ISDA?
Yeah, ISDA, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I want to make sure so an ISDA agreement, right? If we go to Investopedia, right? An ISDA master agreement is the standard document regularly used to govern over-the-counter derivatives transactions. The agreement, which is published by the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, outlines the terms to be applied to a derivatives transaction between two parties, typically a derivatives dealer and a counterplay. The ISDA master agreement itself is standard. Okay, yada, yada, yada. So this is how you do like credit default swaps and like you bet on like companies failing, et cetera, right? In order to get those agreements by these like pseudo government organizations, because they're like private corporations, but they're also like the government says you have to have this, right? It's like the government mandates you have to have these kind of agreements, and then like only basically in order to get in that club, you usually have to be managing like a couple $1 billion in funds. So it's like you can't do the high risk, high reward investments unless you're managing billions of dollars. Right. And so the amount of money that can be made in the market compared to, so you wonder like, how is it that BlackRock and Vanguard and Kathy, oh God, what's her name? I can't remember her name now. I want to say Kathy Newman, but the ARK Investors chick that's like friends with Elon. How are these people able to consistently keep making so much money compared to other investors? It's because they get to do things, even though they're more bureaucratic and they don't make as much money on trades. They get to do trades that aren't legal for anyone else to do. It's a rigged game. And so these big giant management firms are allowed to do things that you or I, we're not legally allowed to make those bets in the stock market because we don't have millions of dollars to be able to make an agreement where the bank will allow us to I mean, and like some of it kind of makes sense, right? Like, cause like, betting $100,000 on like a company failing, like the bank getting involved, right? Like you do need to have some money, but the idea that you need, it's absurdly high, right? And so like my fear is that something similar will happen with AI, where the government steps in and has these pseudo regulations that say that you need to have like these certain agreements, and these agreements must be managed by certain companies that are under other regulations. And what you're going to end up having is Geico will get AI office programs, but your startup won't. Your startup is going to have to pay employees to do all your HR and accounting work. And you're going to have shitty versions of it that the public are allowed to have. But the really good shit, you're not going to be able to afford. And so it's going to be even more impossible to compete with large companies because they're just going to be making money hand over fist despite their own inadequacy.
I mean, look, I can't say that's completely outside of the possibilities. I just feel that that the demand here and the hype has built too much. Like there's going to be a push within the business community to do these things. In fact, the customers are going to expect it, I think, at some point. And
like you're saying, like a big business, if it gets even a little bit too much regulation, will be like, cool, I'll go to Ireland. Like Ireland doesn't have these fucking rules.
Yeah, I think up and down the spectrum, or at least maybe not small business, depends on what sector, but you're going to have this pressure to get access to this technology. As
Right.
like I said previously, like a lot of businessmen aren't like looking at this in the same way, but this is going to be permeating, right? They're going to be going to conferences, and someone's going to be talking about this. They're going to be super excited. Look at what I did.
Right.
Look how many jobs I eliminated. Look how much more money I'm making, right? And as soon as I hear that, like, okay, I got to take a look at this, and for the government to stop that, that would be, I mean, it would be a feat. Not as impossible, but I think it would be a feat to push back.
Right. That's
against
not
something like that.
that's not where I'm worried the government steps in.
Okay.
Where I'm worried the government steps in is when small companies start doing it better. And then big companies start losing money because they're behind the bell curve. Then they start lobbying politicians for more and more regulations, because even if the regulations aren't good regulations, any regulations are going to be easier for large companies with more money to be able to deal with than small companies. And so if I'm
entry.
Right. It's like if I can just get any regulations, it's like, yeah, it'll hurt my business, but it'll hurt my competitors more. And if it hurts my small time competitors more and it keeps me in power, then it's a perfectly good investment. It doesn't matter that it harms humanity, et cetera, or that it gets in the way of those things. But again, the question then becomes like with AI is that we're not talking about a technology that's solely good for business or consumers. It's also good for the military. It's also good for kind of a lot of other things. And so there are other incentives that wouldn't necessarily be there, right? Like the US government or like these people don't want to put themselves too behind the curve on China, right? Et cetera. Like if China is an unregulated kind of like thing or like some other country is like letting the snowball go downhill with no brakes, then we're kind of put in it becomes the next space race. It becomes the next arms race.
Look, and this is like the thing that I wanted to discuss, right? Like, sorry, one thing. Are you recording now? Or
yeah. So I'm always recording. I don't necessarily. A lot of it I don't put out, but I always assume I'm being recorded if I talk to anybody in the online space, and I always record.
I figure
for my safety, but also just in case a cool conversation happens. Well, just because like I never know when someone's going to come out and be like, he did this, and be like, bitch, here's the recording.
No.
You know what I mean? Like I don't play that game.
The sexual harassment from you, it's just been off the charts.
Right. It's like I'll put out the full video and see how you guys feel about it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm actually going to switch headphones real quick. My fucking the Galaxy Buds keep having problems. I don't know why. They work perfectly fine on my phone, but when they're on my PC, they get weird. Oh no, it's fine. I'll switch. It's fine. It'll be fine in a second.
Sure.
I just want to take a quick little break because it seemed like you were going to say something interesting, and I don't want to like.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so like Sora was like it feels like that moment for me, right? Like, okay, so I'm gonna admit something about myself, and it hurts, but like it's the truth, right? Is that like I have not been much of a futurist, like I've seen technologies, like really interesting technologies come. And I'm like, that's not going to go anywhere. And I'm like completely fucking wrong. I'm like, okay. So like completely freaking wrong. Watching those Sora videos, I'm like, this is it. This is the gold rush. Like it's happening right this second. Right? There's going to be a moment, especially when these the more advanced versions of technology start to trickle out to the public, where there is a gold rush happening, and you just got to be there. Like at this point in time, you have to be ready to take advantage of it. And so I'm thinking about this, right? I'm thinking like, okay, like who can I reach out to work with on this? So like I'm like thinking about the context I've made just through this, right? And like, hey, if I bring them something, right? Bring this individual an idea, right? Something to invest in, something small, maybe not with like a lot of risk to go in initially, but just something that we can start working on to get our brains thinking on these things. Like there's got to be something here, right? Something that I could take advantage of.
I mean, it's like the thing that's already is like we're kind of already seeing preferential treatment within this market, right? So like when you look at Sora right now, that video that you showed me, how did he get access to that? He got access to it because he was a big YouTuber. He was a big YouTuber that had like some creative light. So like Sora's not available for me or you, right? We can see what other people are doing on Sora. Like that's, you know what I mean? That's kind of weird. How, like I'm kind of already seeing the gatekeeping occur. And with a technology that moves so fast, it almost feels like 6 months is a death sentence in this technology, right? Like the difference between ChatGPT 4.5 and ChatGPT 3.5, where 3.5 is free, 4.0 is behind a paywall, and 4.5 is kind of like what they're testing right now for like ethical shit, is what OpenAI is doing, right? Is astronomical. Like the difference between 4.5 and 3.5 is like 3.5 is okay. Yeah, so I mean, like it was wild. I was on a Twitter debate the other day with someone, and so I was like, okay, well, you know, they were like, well, answer this question. It was like, and they wanted me to answer like how anarchy like could could like defend itself from China if they invaded, right? And I was like, and they wanted me to do it in a Twitter thread and be like, or else you can't, right? And so I was like, bitch, like I was like, here's a video I did on how anarchy can defend itself. Like, do this, right? And so he came back, like he was like, that video is too long. Anyways, I chat GPT'd it. Is this a good summary of your video? And it had a breakdown with like a few exceptions. That was a great summary of my entire video that it did instantaneously in a Twitter debate. And I was just like, where the fuck are, like, there was some problems with it. Like there was a couple things that were spelled wrong. It didn't fully explain the proper reasoning and logic behind it. But that was like 3.5 that he was using, I'm pretty sure. Right? Like, what is 5.0 in like 6 months going to do? And 5.0 in 6 months is going to be better at debating on Twitter than you'll ever be in your entire fucking life immediately for whatever positions you hold. Like, if you wanted to spread your political ideology on Twitter, you would be stupid to argue with anybody in your own words. You'd be a fucking idiot to not just copy and paste what ChatGPT said. If you tell ChatGPT 5.0 or whatever, right? This is the position I want to uphold. This is the political ideology I believe in. This is what this person said to me. What should I respond with? And source it, please. You'll never be smart enough to compete with that. I'll never be smart enough to compete with that. I mean, as of right now, I have a distinct advantage in the sense that like the shit that I believe is esoteric enough that like ChatGPT doesn't quite get it. You know what I mean? Like, but that's only, well, it's just like, it's like if I ask it to explain things from like a Marxist perspective, right? You know what I mean? Like it gets it. When I ask it to explain things from an anarcho-capitalist perspective, it fucks up, right? Like it says things that are just not right. You know what I mean? But it's like, but that's the more that I look at this shit, the more I realize that it's like, that's 6 months away from being fixed. In 6 months, there's no, I'm telling you, in 6 months, if you're paying for ChatGPT or whenever 4.5 gets released and you can use it, other than immediately occurring current events, right, that require context, there's going to be almost no reason for you to argue in your own words. You're just going to use ChatGPT as a tool to help you facilitate, and you're going to work in tandem. You're directing the AI. You're giving it relevant current information that it may be missing or context that it doesn't understand because it doesn't have a human mind with mirror neurons. And it's doing all of the intelligence data work and sourcing for you and formulating arguments that are actually logical. Like humans are done in intellectual labor. Like we're facilitators of a better design than human brain very soon. And yet it's trained on our own data. So it's not like we're done in forever, that there won't be innovators, but like this massive market of where humans are, you know, where like 10%, you know, or 5% of all humans are involved in intellectual labor. It's going to go down to like 0.1. There'll be very few people are going to be useful anymore in that regard.
I'm not willing to go that far yet in terms of intellectual labor, but maybe we can expand on what exactly you mean by that. Now, does like intellectual labor mean like computer programmers? Would that count as intellectual labor? Or
so I mean, so computer programmers would count as intellectual labor, right? And so how many computer programmers do you need once AI starts writing code, right? Like you just need a watchdog at that point. And let's be honest, the code's going to get away from us and we're never going to be able to catch up to it. But again, the you could say the profit motive of capitalism, or you could say the competitive market between countries, et cetera. We're not slowing that down ever. So, right, like that's just inevitability. But intellectual labor too, like if we look at, let's say, universities, right? There are a bunch of PhD tenured professors, right? And like the top 1% have like all of the citations, right? They have like 99.5% of the citations. Okay. And so like research that's being published by like tenured professors that gets 2 or 3 citations is worthless compared to AI, compared to labs, right? That are going to be able to churn out hundreds and hundreds of fucking things like your typical college professor, PhD that also works in a lab doing some level of research is not going to be valuable anymore. The top people, right? They're still going to be valuable because they're innovating, right? Like the people that come out with studies that all of a sudden get 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 citations because they came up with an idea that nobody else came up with, they'll be valuable because the AI needs to be trained. It's not great at being creative.
Okay. So I feel like so I think it depends on the research that you're talking about. Are you saying that the AI will produce the research itself, right? That hey, there's a problem that there's something that needs to be investigated.
You're going to need the humans for data collection, right? Like, but like that's you don't need to be a PhD to collect data or to do surveys, right?
Fair
what
enough.
I'm saying is so like have you ever were you in college? Did you ever intern at like a research lab or like interview for any of them?
It wasn't in college. It was actually in high school where I was in a research lab for a gifted program thing. Don't worry about it. But like,
right.
That's where my direct experience for that was. Yeah.
Okay, so like in research, so you know like how research labs kind of work, right? And that is that you have one professor that's kind of in charge of a research lab, and then depending on what type of research they're doing, they'll have anywhere from like 10 to 20 like college kids that are basically just, you know, doing the grunt work, right? And then if it's really, really big research, you know, you might have a whole bunch of PhDs involved, especially if it requires anything physical, right? So like, you know, if you're in neuroscience and you need to like take care of lab animals, etc.
The Hadron Collider, yeah.
Well, that's totally different. I don't even want to get into that. I'm just talking about like your typical research lab, right?
Okay.
Right, like because there's like dozens and dozens of these at like every university in America, right? Where there's a couple of professors that are running a lab and like they're doing research on, let's say, you know, aggression, right? Like aggression research, trying to better understand human aggression, et cetera. Like what I'm saying is that like the intellectual labor of like computing that data and then figuring out what that data means is that like you're still going to have one guy running a lab, right? But instead of having a bunch of other doctors, like whenever you look at research, big research, you'll see like a name and then you'll see like a name, right? It'll be like 2 fucking names now because you don't need all those other fucking names because the AI is going to be a co-pilot, if you will, on all of this shit. And it's going to be the genius of a doctor that's really well respected, 1 or 2 other interns, and then AI that computes and does all the work that used to be done by a bunch of interns or a bunch of like tenured professors that like weren't that great.
But okay, hon. But this, so I misunderstood where you're going with this before. But now that you've clarified it, then it seems like the opposite would be true, right? That like not that there's going to be such a bloodbath of these professors, but an expansion, right? An explosion. Because if it's so cheap to be able to do this research without having to hire all these people, like get grant money to do all this, you can then
yeah, that's true. There is a lot of government money too, so
yeah. You could just like jump into it and you can get that computational data work, right? being able to
Well, so,
interpret
like,
that yourself. Yeah.
So, but here's another problem, right? Like you've read enough research from doing online debates, right, to kind of have an idea of how to read research, right? Yeah. And so, if you read research, you know that there's three types of research. There's a lot more than this, but there's when you're prepping for a debate that usually deals with humans, psychology, sociology, politics, etc. There tends to be three types of research. Number one, there's a study. And that study is, an article that's published. They're very boring. The methodology can be difficult to get through. And the conclusions on them are often hyper-specific, right? Then there is a meta-analysis. And that tends to be better for people like us, right? But it also can be misleading because the bias in a meta-analysis biases how they select the studies, how they write about the studies. And often, and you and I have both seen people that they read a meta-analysis and a meta-analysis completely agrees with them, but it's like, this is bullshit. And then you find research and you find data that contradicts it and you go, oh, there was a bias that the researcher had in their selections, I saw one when it was I won't get into that. So right. And then the third one is even worse and better. So it has different uses, which is a literature review, right? A literature review is like an expert in the field that has an opinion, right? And kind of writes a short article about where the research is. And you just kind of have to trust their opinion on the research. But it can be very informative about where everything's going in a quick, easy to read article. It's like the academic version of a pop psychology article, right? It's good, it's informative, but it's not necessarily the truth. Yeah. Meta-analysis and literature review are full of bias, and they're important means of communicating in the field and out of the field. I don't see a world where I would trust an expert in the field to write me a meta-analysis or a literature review as opposed to artificial intelligence. I would absolutely trust an expert in the field to run a study and try and make sure that the study is done properly and ethically and things like that, right? But them separating their bias for a meta-analysis when an AI can look at every single solitary fucking article that's ever been written in human history, take in all of that information, see where the contradictions are, see where the growth is, assign a perfect probabilistic, not perfect, but a near perfect probabilistic outcome based off of every single doctor, how many citations, give an accuracy score based off of the citations that the person has, be able to determine how well respected they are, etc., and be able to formulate a bias, intentional bias, that near perfectly demonstrates the actual bias of the entire community, right? No human will be able to do that. No human will be able to write a meta-analysis or a literature review as good as an artificial intelligence will. It's beyond human capability what AI should be able to do in the next, I don't know. I can't even give timelines on this shit anymore.
No timelines anymore. We can't do that. Yeah.
Right. It's it feels like it's a couple years away and then it might come out next month.
After Sora, then I've given up on that. And in fact, I'm not sure if you saw that in the beginning of the video, the second video that I sent you, they showed a guy actually being crazy wrong on this. It
was like 3 years old, and he was like, our grandkids, And it's I don't blame him for not realizing that shit was around the corner.
That could have been any of us making that statement, and now I just don't believe it anymore.
Copilot was the big one for me. Copilot and Unreal Engine 5.2 is what woke me the fuck up. I was awake, obviously, I was paying attention, but then I was like, oh shit, whatever's happening behind the scenes, we have no idea how fast it's working. And I'm almost curious. I don't want to be conspiratorial at all, but I do wonder deeply with Sora, if Sora had played a role in Sam Altman when the board attempted to get rid of Sam Altman, because they got rid of him. They ousted Sam Altman, and then he came right back, and nobody really knows what happened. But the rumor mill in tech was that there was a big leap that occurred in in ChatGPT or in something, and that he was supposed to inform the board immediately, and he didn't. We don't know if that's true or not. But looking at Sora, I was like, was there a leap that led to Sora's creation? Is that why Sora came out of fucking nowhere with this like insane jump in video technology? It seems to lend credence to the concept that he might have been ousted because he wasn't as open about one of the particular leaps being made in AI. And then after all the dust settles a couple months later, like 2 months later, we get Sora. I don't know. I'm starting to believe those rumors a little bit, that there was a leap made back there. And I'm curious if that leap applies to ChatGPT that they're working on right now.
I feel like the truth will come out on that one. Like that one is going to be released at some point. But like, so I just for a second, I did want to go back to the AAA video game things because I didn't finish making my point there.
I talked too goddamn much. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's fine, friend. But yeah, so we can, if what was being said at the end of that video that I shared with you is correct, then like these companies are already working on eliminating positions, right, on a lower level. And this is like without Sora, I keep wanting to say Snow for some reason, but without Sora being introduced into this, right, this has been on the table for months, so that they've been churning through these processes.
Because these companies might still be bureaucratic, but they're tech companies, right? Like they're not as slow to move on new tech and computer stuff as like, an insurance company.
It is. That's why, and this is why I wanted to, push back. It's because that's part of their model, right? Is that they're constantly having to look at the new tech, the new thing out there. So they're a lot more nimble when these things are like. Their people are always being trained on something new, right? If it's a new game engine or whatever the fuck. Like I'm looking at like the state of the video game market, and you know as well as I know that between the PS4 and the PS5, there was not some sort of huge graphical leap, that we hit a plateau. Yeah, it hasn't. Like, in fact, I was just watching a video, a video game donkey. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this guy. He makes like funny videos. Let me find that for you real quick.
I disagree. I disagree with the not making a big leap, only because I was following the GPU market. It was probably what actually happened was NVIDIA and Intel have been exactly like Steve Jobs was talking about with Xerox. They were not putting out for years, right? They were not putting out anything. AMD started nipping at their fucking heels and overtook performance of Intel for a while, right? Despite Intel being like 80 times larger as a company than AMD, right? And they were getting really close to doing it to NVIDIA. And so they made NVIDIA have really big leaps. And so I actually disagree in terms of the jump. The thing is that when you look from PS4 to PS5, that's not actually the right window to look at, because you're looking at when the PS4 came out. You're correct. In that time period, that's not a big leap. But all of that leap, nearly like 80% of the graphics change, happened like within a year of the PS5 coming out, because that's when AMD started scaring the fuck out of NVIDIA. And that is also the first time that AMD has the rights to both the CPU and the GPU in the PS5. So the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox are both, the newest Xbox, are both run on AMD, not Intel and NVIDIA. And that was a big blow, especially to NVIDIA. Intel could give a rat's ass because they have so many government contracts and servers. Like that's where most of their money comes from anyways, is like servers. And NVIDIA is kind of the same with like all of this AI shit is all run on NVIDIA GPUs and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
And like NVIDIA has their own, that's why NVIDIA is so much quicker with like their oh God, what is it? Their AI systems that they use in your GPUs. I can't remember the name. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so I do disagree. I would buy back just a little bit, but I think yes, when you compare the PS4 to the PS5, it's not a huge difference compared to everything else that happened. But like, one, the PS5 is suffering from the same problem, exacerbated by COVID, that every console suffers from, which is that it takes game developers like a year or two to figure out how to create a game that optimizes the settings in that, right?
You only
So
get
a
the
lot
best,
of these games,
looking games at the end of the cycle. No, I hear you.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
But still, I think that in terms of, especially to the customers' expectations, right? We haven't gotten what we expected in terms of like, like this is like truly next gen. Like I hear this conversation over and over again. But like
Yeah.
looking at Sora, like I they're talking about moving on to the PSX. Like the video I just sent to you, we talked about how Sony has said in a report that just came out like this week or last week that they're that we're always halfway through the PS5 life cycle, and the PS6 will be coming in like 4 or 5 years, people estimate, right? If I was Sony and I was looking at all this happening, I would hold off on the PS6. I would honestly do that. Like, let's hold off on this, on whatever architecture that we're planning to build, because there's a major jump that's about to happen. And we just need, like, first we need the technology to get in their hands, and I don't think they have it yet, right? But like, once we have an engine that can actually take advantage of these things, right? Like, imagine the assets you could create, right?
So
let me finish it.
Yeah.
Let me just finish it.
Sorry.
Imagine the assets that you could create. I'm looking at Street Fighter 6, which is the latest Street Fighter. And there's these like opening cinematics when like the fighters are entering the arena, and then there's the actual gameplay, right? And if you look closely at the fighters, they're like super like low res actually.
Right.
And like there's like a disconnect there, like compared to, like, the opening cinematics. I'm thinking, like, looking at that woman, the woman walking through Tokyo, right? I'm thinking, like, if you could come up with those assets and you could rig those assets and put them in, like, what would Street Fighter 7 look like? Now, I don't know if this is going to be ready for the PS6. I'm not sure if we're going to fully wrap our minds around this for the PS6 in terms of architecture, but the PS7 is going to be something completely different. Right?
So this is
going to be. Go ahead.
This is what I would say to PlayStation. If PlayStation, I know you're listening, right? Right. But this is what I would, like, if I actually had a thing, is I would say they need to scrap the PS6. They need to scrap the PS7. They need to go back to the drawing board. And what they need to do is they need their engineers to come up with a modular PlayStation where graphics card and processors and memory and hard drive can be removed and inserted piece by piece. Here's why.
PC?
Yes, like a PC, right? But more like you have slots, right? And it's just individual components. Why? Here's why. Because as the technology evolves, it's evolving too fast. And you don't want people that have the money to be a slave to having to wait 4, 5, 6 years for the next PlayStation, the next console. If they have the money, you want them to be able to go to the store and for $200 buy a new CPU, or buy a new part 3, this part, right? That increases, or buy a new thing, pull it out with a handle, slide it in with a handle, and it's done, and it upgrades the component. The thing that I would say is, the reason I would say this is, one, this will allow them to upgrade more quickly, as opposed to having to create entirely new systems and consoles. Number one. Number two, this would gain a lot of respect with your number one advertisers, because your number one advertisers are not websites. Your number one advertisers are not journalists. They're not magazines. Your number one advertisers are super, super, super geeky YouTubers. That is how you make your money in these things. And if you can get the right to repair people on the concept of reducing price of systems by having modular systems that are very, very easy to upgrade so that you don't have to buy a new thing every couple of years, and you can sell them on that concept and you can do it well, you can have really good advertising, and you can have a new system that you can make more money milking out of the whales from people that'll buy a new upgrade the moment it comes out. Because there are people out there that are fanboys that'll immediately buy a new GPU the second it comes out because they just love PlayStation or whatever. And you will be able to make more sales, and you'll be able to have a system that consistently is able to scale games. Because as of right now, the games are made for a system. But the thing is that almost all of these games, very few exceptions, are also made for PC. It's not difficult for the people that make, almost everyone that makes these games, to make it to where there's medium settings, high settings, ultra settings, right? They do it for PC anyways. And so it wouldn't be difficult at all for a game to automatically detect what settings are, what pieces are in your PlayStation, right? And then immediately create the preset of graphic preset in those systems so that you could take advantage of this new technology to make beautiful games while at the same time having downscaled technology, because that's what a lot of the AI is doing now, right? In AMD and NVIDIA has this, deep learning super sampling. That's the word I was looking for, right? Where you downscale it to 380, 360p, and then bring it, with AI to 1080, etc.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would do if I was Sony, is that I would try and get ahead of this, because if they don't get ahead of this, what's going to end up happening is AI isn't just going to be used for software. AI is going to increase the efficiency of tech companies. And so this concept we have that has been plateauing recently is, I forget the name of it, but it's every 15 months, processing power and memory doubles for the same resources.
Yeah, there's the law, Murphy's Law.
No, it's not. Murphy's Law is like anything bad that can happen will happen.
No, sorry, not Murphy's, but there's a law. There's a
law.
Right?
I think it's Moore's
Sorry.
law. I think it's
Moore's Law. Yeah,
law.
it starts with M.
And so that has been plateauing. That has been proved to not be true recently. But once all of these tech companies start instituting AI, Moore's Law is coming back, baby, and it might come back even faster than ever. And so what's going to end up happening is your PC users are going to outpace your console users, because mass production of an entire console every 6 to 7 years isn't going to cut it. It's not going to cut it, because the market is going to move fast enough and cheap enough to where PC users can upgrade their computer quickly. So you're going to need to mimic the upgradability to some extent of PCs. And that's what I would get ahead of now. And if you can beat Xbox, or vice versa, if Microsoft can beat Sony to it, I think they'll gain a lot of goodwill with consumers, because a lot of the YouTubers will come out there and they'll be like, this means that you don't have to, spend all of this money on a new PlayStation. You know what I mean? Like, this is going to increase the longevity of your PlayStation by years and years. Like, this is such a great thing. Yada, yada. Like, if you can sell it right and you can do it right and to where it looks good and it works well, that's what I would do. And that's how you catch up with the AI, or at least stay capable of utilizing it, is what I would say. It's a better word.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hear what you're trying to say.
I'm just spitballing. I don't make fucking video games for a living,
Yeah, fair enough. I hear you. I'm thinking, if I'm at Sony, right? Well, if I'm at Microsoft and I'm hearing this, this sounds more interesting to me at Microsoft than it does at Sony. One, because we're already in the PC market. I mean, we are the PC market, right?
Right.
And then, secondly, we are number 3, right? We're number 3 in terms of the console wars, that came out.
It's the exclusivity problem.
Yeah. So I'm the head of Microsoft, I'm more interested in reconsidering things, right? To tearing things down. If I'm Sony, and I'm I shouldn't say necessarily number 1, but number 1 in in terms of like pushing graphical fidelity in the console market. And I'm massively ahead of my competitor. I don't really give a fuck about this, right? And things are working well. And this idea of being more consumer friendly, and you were talking about like the right to repair shit. Like we don't give a fuck about that.
Oh no, I'm not saying they're gonna. I'm saying
Yeah.
I said if I could give advice to these people, right, to
No, I hear you.
survive in 15 years,
I hear you. I know.
get ahead of
I know
this.
that's what you're saying. I'm just saying that like I'm looking at this, but I'm thinking like if I was in that position though, what would I do? And
Yeah.
I think that they have a model and a model for development, for console development, that works and is cheap, right? Like cheap for the
Yeah.
consumer, in terms
Yeah,
of
for
that,
sure.
right? Yeah. And so what I'm thinking is like, how do I, um, like, are there
Accelerate that
tools out
working
there?
model.
Yeah. And are
Right.
there tools out there? And first of all, we could do multiple console refreshes, which I think they could do. But also, are there tools out there that are even taking advantage of this yet? Right? Like, is there the Unreal Engine 6 AI that's
Mm-hmm.
coming out? And like, is it worth me investing that into this next generation? PS7, like I was saying, like that is like a big question mark
Guaranteed. Yeah.
as to what that. Yeah. Like things
It's
change
guaranteed all those
by
tools and
PS7.
shit by that time it's going to be
Exactly.
commonplace. Yeah.
So yeah, I if I'm sitting at Sony, I'm like, I'm sitting back and I'm looking because anyway, like a video game development, as you already know, takes years any which way. Right now, maybe it will shorten with AI. I don't know, but like it's still going to take years. And so I'd be like looking at the PS6
I
as
think it'll
my
stratify.
transition. Yeah, my transition point to digital only, which is what they're trying to push, is unbelievable, extremely unuser friendly. But I'd be looking at that, and then PS7, the question mark at that point. But but
Yeah.
I just wanted to say this one thing though, like and this is like
No, I'm thinking. Yeah.
I
Sorry.
the
Sometimes I
seven.
speak when I'm thinking. I apologize.
Okay,
This is part
yeah,
of
no
being
problem. No
ADHD.
problem. Well, but the there was that show. It was called That 70s Show. You watched that show back then? That
Yeah.
70s Show?
Yeah.
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 So there's
I'm a
an
little
episode.
older.
Yeah. There's an episode with Kelso, right? And
Mhm.
Red, the father of the main character Foreman, right? Yeah. There were episodes with both of them who usually don't interact, but Kelso gets like an Atari, uh, and he's got like Pong on it, right? And he's like playing this, and then like Red finds out, and he's like amazed by it, and then he's like gets deep into Pong, right? And watching him
Mhm.
go back and forth, and like this is like the future, right? And it was meant to be like anarchistic to our eyes, like not anarchistic, I'm sorry, but like old to ours, like that's like a silly thing to say, like, oh wow, this is amazing, right? Like look at this technology,
Yeah.
but but that's on the basis that it gets people thinking, well, if we could just bring them, right, like our current day consoles, and by at that time it was like the Xbox 360, right, like if we could show them the future, they would be blown away, right? They'd be looking at us as
Mhm.
Superman, like what is this, and I see this moment happening now, right? I've never been so jealous of the young, and until I was watching Sora, because in 20 years, right, maybe even shorter than that, but 20 years, what they are going to have is just like all these impressive games that we're also proud of and excited to play now, right? They're going to be like Pong. And
Mhm.
I've never seen like this leap is going to be the new genres of gaming it's going to open up, right? Like this is that moment, that big canyon that's opening up, and yeah, I just feel like I just hope I can get there to experience it.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing about this technology is that makes it, terrifying, right? Especially if you listen to like, some of the doomsdayers, right? That are worried that like we're making our own gods, right? Um, the thing that's terrifying about this technology is that the technology feeds itself, right? Like it becomes circular, right? Which is to say that the technology is intellectual in nature. And because it's intellectual in nature, it writes code, right? It improves. It's not the same thing as artificial general intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the more we start to see AI evolve, the more I think we start to realize that it doesn't matter whether or not AGI exists. That like all of the problems inherent to the concept of AGI are essentially inherent to the problems of AI anyways. Which is to say, yeah, we're nowhere near, well, I don't want to say that ever again, but it doesn't appear that we're anywhere near well, philosophically, like philosophically, it's very possible, almost likely, I would say, given my positions, impossible to create artificial general intelligence in the same concept of consciousness, right? I don't know. It might be possible. There are issues because of the way that training data works, right? But setting that aside, the more important thing to recognize isn't, is AGI here? How far away is that, et cetera, and the dangers of AGI. I think the more important thing to recognize here recently is it doesn't matter. We don't need AGI to exist for all of the problems that we've theorized AGI will have to be a problem, right? So like the paperclip, right? Like, the paperclip AI problem, right? Like we used to think of that as a problem of AGI, and now it's like it's a perfect like the systems we're creating right now are clearly intelligent, right? They're not intelligent at all, but they clearly have the same like you don't need AGI for the paperclip problem to exist. 5 years ago, I would have thought that requires a leap in consciousness, right? The ability to perceive and then break down those perceptions into like you need the law of identity, right? So like if you look at formal logic, right? There's three kind of things in formal logic. This is the basis for all logic. There's the law of identity, there's the law of excluded middle, and there's the law of non-contradiction, right? So when you look at the law of identity, the ability to, that means that this pen, right, is not a pen, but it's this pen, right? There is no other this pen. There can be copies of this pen. There can be similar things of this pen, right? But until very, very recently, it seemed like you need a body and a consciousness to really recognize this pen as an individual pen. Because that's what humans do. We identify, right? Like that is the beginning of logic, is the ability to perceive and identify that this is a thing that is separate from all other things. And I can draw parallels to this thing to all of it. We're already developing AI that can do that. So does it matter? It doesn't matter that AGI doesn't exist if it's all probabilistic pattern recognition. If it can identify, right? and like as that little device thing that you were showing, the rabbit, right? Like it's looking at a screen and going, yeah, it's a Charmander and it's on a fucking screen, and then the Charmander is, it's got this is what it is. It's got a wispy, fiery tail and they're inside and like there's windows and it's a cabin. Like it's identifying things and it's separating those identities. Now it's not actually doing that as a consciousness. It's just doing it as like random pattern recognition. The Chinese language problem.
No, I don't. Sorry.
Okay, so you know the Turing test, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So the Turing test, you're right. So the Chinese language or the Chinese language I can't remember the exact name, but it's something like that. Is like kind of a defeat of the Turing thing, right? And basically what it is there's a guy in a room, right? And he speaks English and he doesn't speak Chinese, right? And so what you do is you give him, piece at a time, direct instructions on how to translate a Chinese word, right? That says this word goes to this word. And then you translate every single word, right? And then the person on the other end of the room goes, well, this person must speak Chinese. Well, no, they don't, right? They just received a set of coded instructions that taught them how to take each individual letter and turn it into our letters, right? And then turn it into something that like was a direct translation, kind of like Google Translate does, right? So obviously this is older than Google Translate, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like we're getting to a point where it doesn't matter that the machine doesn't speak Chinese, because the machine is able to translate Chinese more accurately than the fucking human. So like it doesn't matter that the machine doesn't actually speak Chinese. There's no conscious entity that speaks Chinese. There's no thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires. There's no lizard brain. There's no consciousness there. And so, but it doesn't fucking matter. The dangers of AGI controlled by humans, the dangers of AI controlled by humans are at a certain point. It's like it's already here, and in a way it's scarier than iRobot, right? It's scarier than the doomsday things where like a machine decides to take over, because like Sora is like, because it's intellectual labor, we can know certain things for a fact, right? And that is that if it's intellectual in nature and it makes an improvement, that means that its next improvement must be better, because the thing that we're training is intellectual, right? Right. So like if it codes, right, and then we train it to get better, it gets better at that thing. Once we start giving it tasks to improve itself, that means the thing itself improves itself. And every iteration makes it better at improving itself because it improved itself. And once that gets out of the domain of how quickly humans can adapt, it becomes a runaway problem because it's exponential. So if it always is 10% better, and then it gets to the point where it's better than humans, then the next time it's 10% better than humans. Then the next time it's 21% better than humans. Then the next time it's 32% better than, right? Like it's times 1.1 over and over, but it's not actually times 1.1. It's times 1.1 the first time, right? And then that 10% improvement is baked in. So now it's times 1.2 from the 1.1 better than humans. It becomes the situation of like that old girl, that Indian proverb where she asks the king for a grain of rice and for it to be doubled every day. And the king happily accepts. One grain of rice doubled for a day. Right. And then at the end of the month, the king's silos are completely drained because he didn't realize the power of exponentials. That's what we're training when we're training AI that can write itself and write code to improve itself. And so it doesn't matter that AGI doesn't exist, because if the patents are held by large corporations, they're going to very quickly, these improvements that seem crazy, the next jump has to be crazier than the one we just had, because it's going to be utilizing technology that helps improve itself. So whatever you see with Sora right now, the next Sora isn't going to be equally as shocking as Sora. By definition, it almost has, I mean, not by definition because it's probabilistic, right? But the likelihood is that it's more likely to be more shocking than Sora was, not less shocking. And that pattern will repeat itself over and over again. And so I don't know what the fuck that means when large corporations hold these patents on these things that are that powerful. What we hope is that the power keeps getting distributed back to people, and that there's meaningful competition.
I don't think the patent system is the issue here. It's the
I'm not blaming patent per se. I'm just saying, like, what happens when that system is controlled by, if these systems are controlled monopolistically once they start popping off to where they're beating human thought, and then they're just going above and above, right? Like, because imagine a labor saving device, right? That where you can where the efficiency allows you to fire 10% of your staff, right? or to increase your profits by 10%. There might be plateaus based off of other aspects in the real world, but if the technology keeps getting better and it's held by a monopoly, then that 10% becomes 20% more work, or 20% more profit. Then it becomes 40% more profit, then 100% more profit, then 200% more profit. Then, before you know it, it's 1,800% more profit than any other company that doesn't have this technology. Now, granted, they're all going to have their own competing things, so hopefully that's okay. But that's my big cause for concern if it's gate kept, is that like it only takes one to get ahead of the pack and gatekeep, and like we're in a bad spot.
So I guess the thing I'm pushing back against is like where the problem is here. It's not that like that's why I'm saying it's not the patent system so much, is that as of now, the cutting edge and development of such technologies requires an immense amount of resources, right? And computing time, right? Like we have data centers that are being cooled by fucking rivers, by underground aquifers. Like there's so much infrastructure for this type of, this isn't a thing that like people can build in their basements. Now, like we can take that technology and use it for applications that people can build in their basements, but like the base technology of itself, that is at least now beyond us. There might be some sort of technological breakthrough in the future in which that's not the case, but as of now, that's the big issue. So we can only have like these huge tech companies that have hundreds of billions, or like with the government backing, hundreds of billions.
Here's the problem. Once you train a system to write code and it keeps getting better, it doesn't necessarily have to get better and use more power. The definition of get better is also going to bake in getting more efficient, using less lines of code to do the same thing in a way that humans can't comprehend. Right? Like it's kind of like how we saved space. The whole Y2K scare was because we saved space by turning, 1993 into 9293. And then we had to have a fuck ton of coders all around the world work towards changing all of these systems from like two numbers to four numbers. And Y2K didn't happen because of that. But people think it was just a giant scare, but it's actually all of their fears would have happened if we didn't put any effort towards actually changing that, right? So in the reverse order, right, lines of code that we think are necessary because of our limited human brains are going to be rewritten by AI in much more simplistic forms where they don't need as much power. They don't need as much memory. They don't need as much CPU computations because they'll be using mathematical equations that are more simplistic to convey the same thing. I don't know what the limiting factor on that is, right? Like there is a limit. I agree with you. But efficiency is going to be baked into that as well.
Yeah, I think there's going to be.
I'm not trying to get doom and gloom. I'm just saying, like,
no, I don't think you are.
Yeah, it's like my issue is that like get rid of if we maintain Moore's law and we just put Moore's law 15 years ahead, right? And then we look at this AI and how fast it's leaping. There's by every calculation, AI ought in 15 years be able to compute 10,000 years of human thought in a day. Right? Like that's not something humans can compete with. Like it's just not. It's something we can use, but not compete with.
Yeah. And so, but I guess this thing I would focus in on is the competing part, and that like we don't have to, right? Like this is where I don't think this is a doomsday scenario, right? Because compete with implies that like we're necessarily within that same market space. Like what we do is adapt around it, right? So like we have this tool that can surpass us in computational thought and ability, great, right? But what we're doing is directing these things. We're finding the applications to use the applications that matter to us, right? Because like like these things are for our own society. It only becomes a problem, I don't know, if you have uh like AI with like AI physical bodies like doing work in the world, then maybe that makes
Yeah.
sense. But beyond that, like since we are the ones within the physical world who have the ability to use this AI for good or for ill, it's more that we have this tool to make these discoveries and then use these discoveries in a way that like it benefits our society or benefits our goals any which way.
For sure.
Not these societies goals.
Let me pause it to you, kind of like what I mean by like the fear of like an entity controlling this power, right?
Yeah,
as it sits right now, like Sora shocked us, right? And we're like, holy shit, that came out of nowhere. And it's a giant jump, right? Now, as I described earlier, these jumps are almost assuredly, maybe not, not necessarily each time, right? But over a string of multiple iterations, right? The pattern will be that each of these jumps will be a bigger jump than the previous one. And also these jumps will occur quicker and quicker. That's going to be the pattern, right? So when it took us 6 months to get a jump, next time it'll take us 3 months. And then it'll take us a month and a half. And then we'll have one of these jumps every week. And each of these jumps every week will be bigger and more shocking than the one last week. When you try and conceptualize and understand that pattern is a runaway train, right? Where each jump is bigger than the next one and is quicker than the next one, and that there's no reason to believe that there's a major limiting factor beyond the physical computations, which will be getting information from these AIs that help us build more efficient systems too, right? The code will be more efficient, but also AI is going to tell us how to build more efficient switchboards eventually. Like once it's filled with all of the data that we know in manufacturing these things, it's going to go, blip, here's a blueprint. This shit's twice as fast as what you're making, right? Like it's like eventually that's just going to be a thing, right? Like you're making these 17 unnecessary errors in this computer chip that you just invented, and it would be 15% more efficient if you just built the pathways this way. Here's the blueprint. I'm going to start the 3D printer for you so you have a prototype. You good? It'll be ready in 15 minutes, right? Like that'll be what AI is going to do. That will just like completely destroy 2 years of human research at Intel will be done in 5 minutes because the AI will laugh at it. It won't laugh because it doesn't have the capacity to laugh, but it'll just do in 5 minutes what took 200 of the smartest people in Taiwan 2 years of research to do, right? So when we get to that point, and there's no reason to believe that we don't get to that point, what happens when one of the bigger jumps occurs? Right? Because there's always a bigger jump. The next jump is bigger than the next one. But probabilistically, some will be smaller and some will be bigger.
Yeah.
What happens when the Chinese government gets a jump so big that within a few minutes, they realize that they have a tool that can shut down the power grid and immediately wipe out 2/3 of all of the United States and immediately shut down our internet, our infrastructure, and use artificial intelligence that will blow up every single thing in the existence in the United States that is connected to a computer, that will allow them to set every gas station to immediately blow up, every power facility to immediately blow up every dam that has too many computers set up to it, etc. Or whatever, you know what I mean? Like obviously some of that's fantasy and wouldn't actually work that way. But at the very least, easily shut down our internet, shut down our GPS, shut down all of our satellites, shut down our entire technological capacity, and shut down our ability to fire nuclear weapons. Instantaneously, they control all of our nuclear weapons. That's the real problem with AI, is that we used to think that would require AGI, and I think people are starting to realize it doesn't matter. Like AI and NLPs are working to gain that capacity and that power without consciousness. The consciousness is an unnecessary element. It's a tool now, right? So it has to be driven by humans, right? It has to be programmed and written and driven by humans. But what happens when those humans are horrible people?
Well, I mean, I mean, like, what happens with the horrible people? Like, you're basically like pick your sci-fi dystopian world, right?
Right.
And
Right.
like
Well,
that's
I'm
what
just saying, like,
happens.
you don't need iRobot,
But
right? Like, that's what I'm saying. It's like you
yeah,
don't
I know,
need
I hear you.
iRobot. You could just,
Of
at the
course.
same time, mutually assured destruction is kind of like a situation. I think with nukes is probably going to be the same thing with AI, which is that the Chinese will never actually fully know what it is that we have, and vice versa, and whoever else is developing,
Yeah,
whatever other company,
arms
right?
race.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's going to be a massive arms race here. But like, what I'm saying is that like that arms race is going to be beyond our fucking comprehension very quickly,
Mm.
and the arms race has to be done, right? Because now once you realize that China has that power, it's like, okay, yeah, but there'll be an arms race. Okay, it's yeah, but there will be an arms race. The US government's going to have to do this in order to protect from the Chinese government doing this. And that means the safety measures that are necessary to keep this shit from being a problem are all of a sudden going to become less and less so long as we keep up with the competition. And what's going to happen is we're going to know less and less about the code we're writing. We're not really going to know what the fucking code is that we're writing because we're going to task it all to AI that's working, doing thousands of years of human thought instantaneously. So like we'll be so far behind we don't actually know what it's doing. We just know that we're giving it tasks and we kind of have an understanding that those tasks are being done, and like it explains the logic of certain things, but like no one human will be able to fully comprehend or grasp what the thing is itself. And so it's like, does that create a singularity? Does that create consciousness? Does that create AGI? I don't. That's where the sci-fi really gets in because I don't think it does. But at the same time, when you create
It
something
doesn't
that
need
fucking
to.
powerful, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like we're cavemen playing with nuclear weapons. Like it doesn't matter that the nuclear weapon is good or evil. It's we're cavemen with fucking bats, with sticks playing with nuclear weapons. Like evil or not, like if we fuck up and we hit the wrong button, we all die.
Mm.
Hence the paperclip machine problem. It's like if we hit the wrong button, we go clean up all the paper clips, then all of a sudden the entire earth is turned into paper clips. Fucking the AI didn't do anything wrong. It just was trying to make paper clips. That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting inversion of the of like it's like not well. I'm not sure if inversion is the word I'm looking for, but like an interesting modification of the the gray goose scenario, where but like it like in something like that, and in scenarios such as that, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like humans have actually hit the button, right? Like, okay, we just need a lot of paper clips here, right? We just needed
Right.
this to happen. And we were like, okay, we're just gonna walk away from this process, and we're gonna come back, and there's gonna be a lot of paper clips. We're gonna sell the paper clips, as opposed to like there was some sort of like unrelated problem, and we had these nanobots within our the environment, and then they just started multiplying outside of our control. Like, I mean, who could have seen that coming? But I don't know. I just think it's a interesting like a mirror reflection of
Yeah. No,
that.
I just mean like it's like unintended consequences is really the only thing, right? Is that like you've heard me talk about this in debate panels and stuff plenty of times, right? The government does something, they think it'll fix problems, it actually creates new problems, right? And the thing is that like the more powerful the tool, the more likely the unintended consequences are more disastrous, right? Like the more you do, the more likely you are to cause problems. And so when we're playing, it's kind of like the difference between, it's like we're playing with fire. So if we do something, we think it'll totally work. It's like, I don't think it'll be like, it doesn't need to be evil, and it doesn't need to be a consciousness. It can just be an unintended consequence of an incredibly powerful tool. Like, oh, fuck, how do we fix this? And then you can't. Because like we don't have an infrastructure anymore. So like, how do you stop a code?
So I guess the thing, one of the things that just makes it so that I don't necessarily worry about these things. It doesn't keep me up at night.
Yeah, I mean, it
Um,
doesn't me either, but it's just, I'm just
yeah,
talking.
no, I know. But like it's like our adaptability to these things, because as we integrate new technologies into our lives, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's these dangers, a whole list of dangers, depending on the technology, and a whole list of ramifications. Quite a bit of them come true, but like on that path, right, to what could be oblivion, there's a lot of decision making that happens, and
Mm-hmm.
I see, like, I think there, because there's a lot of collective decisions rather than a single person's decision, right? A single person
Right.
making a mistake, right? That
There's
there's
no one
a
world government ruled by an emperor, right? Like
yeah,
there are companies, there are different countries, there are different things, and like there will be
it's the marketplace.
smaller failures. Yeah,
Yeah.
that. Hopefully, we learn our lessons from the smaller failures, etc. As we kind of
I'm describing the marketplace. This is exactly what I'm doing right here, right? Like this is a collective. Yeah, like a collective.
In a sense,
yeah. That these collective movements of individuals with our goals, competing goals, basically, like we go down the path that allows us to the most people to accomplish their goals, right? And that might be involving like putting safeguards in place, right? Like the reason that we can't accomplish our goals unless we have these safeguards, unless we don't do these certain actions. That doesn't stop everyone from doing that, right? There's going to be individuals who will maybe do disastrous things, but like because of all these decisions, that in aggregate, like the path that we end up is not maybe a paradise, right? But it's some sort of a livable equilibrium. Does any of that make sense? What I'm trying to say here?
I mean, like, so yeah. I mean, like, so I think Elon Musk, the neural network, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think he has identified, and plenty of people before him have done it, right? He's just the first person to put money and research behind it, in a meaningful way. Maybe not even in a meaningful way. That's not fair, right? He's the most famous person doing, putting the most money into it, because I think this is more important to him than I think SpaceX or anything else is the neural network. And the reason is because all of that is true. The problem is that we're dealing with a tool that we eventually won't understand. Right. The tool will sure. The problem is that the collective individuals, no human will understand it. Right. So it'll be trial and error with a tool that's incredibly powerful that literally no one gets. And so the question is how do you solve that problem of no one understanding said tool? And the way that you solve that problem is that you get rid of the brain's inadequacy to understand the problem. The way that you get rid of the brain's inadequacy to understand the problem is integration, right? Is that the two become one. Now, you can look at that in a sci-fi fantasy way where the man becomes the cyborg machine and like morphs and like the nanobots reconstruct. No, what we're talking about is the fact that if I want to use ChatGPT is fast as fuck. But what's not fast is me typing into ChatGPT and then me reading ChatGPT. That's the slow part, is me typing it and me reading it. It's not ChatGPT's response can be faster, right? And better programs will be, much, much faster. But the slowdown is the user interface, which is my cell phone or another phone, right? And so that's kind of the in order for what you're saying in the doomsday shit to not be true, I do think that at a minimum, we're going to have something like a neural, computer chips, of some sort that allow us to instantaneously, quote unquote, type and read, right? It's like we don't need to have our brain be a slave to ChatGPT, but we need to be able to ask the AI questions and very close to instantly get responses and then be able to process that information and have it connected and fed into our brain instantaneously. So there's going to have to, that's the only way that we're going to be able to conceivably understand the tool that we're using. If we can do that and still keep our humanity, well, I mean, then it's no longer iRobot film. Now all of a sudden it's one of those like African, fucking, what are those like trans futurist fucking African, you know what I'm talking about? Those fucking, oh my God, what is it? Those, it's in college. I can't remember the name of them. It's like this like branch of people that are like writing Afrofuturism. That's what I'm looking for. Like then it becomes like one of these utopic fucking like blending of machine and fucking man. Right? Like, it's not really a problem, right? Because if we can at the very least talk to the machines and get the information instantaneously and process the information instantaneously, then it's a tool that we kind of understand, and then that's fine, right? And we can do all kinds of cool shit. So like I think that's probably where we're headed, and I think it's a white pill. I do agree with you that I think people are freaking out about it a little bit too much, but it is going to be interesting to see what happens in our culture when you're basically, if you want to keep up economically, if you want to live and work in this world without starving or without living in a pod given to you by the government, you're going to have to fucking get the chip. And the chip's going to fucking change the way you think and act and behave. It's going to be fucking weird to see what happens if we're around to see it. Because, like, that's the shit that fantasy novels are certainly made of. But at the same time, I don't think it'll be... I think people think it's going to be like a fantasy book. And there's going to be, like, wars and riots and, like, religious movements and shit. When really, most of us are just going to get the fucking chip. It's not really going to be that big of a deal. And there's going to be like 70 different Alex Jones YouTubers talking about the end is nigh because of this shit. And everyone else is going to be like, dude, I got the chip because it makes me so I can fucking like so I can have a good job. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I got a bank loan for the chip, just like you got a bank loan for the fucking college degree. It was $80,000. They did the surgery and now I make like $150K a year and you're still making $30K. Like, what are you doing, you idiot?
The other thing that that I always understand is that with all these technologies, right, between now and like Oblivion, there are frictions, right? There are just like either inefficiencies or limitations that we don't currently understand, especially at the beginning of these things when we're like catastrophizing, right? Like you or I can't see the edges, right? Like we're in this very large lake and we don't know where the shores are, right? But they're there, they're somewhere. But like we're just looking out and we're saying this is endless. But there are limitations here. And once we wrap our minds around it, right? Considering everything you just said, but quote unquote, wrap our minds around those limitations, that's when we'll have like the lay of the land. And that's where we'll find these inefficiencies that keep us from sliding out like wherever, right? These ways in which we as humans have the advantage or at the very least, the technology can't do all the things that we thought it could do. Or it diverges, like the use cases for this technology diverges in a way that we can't see at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like, I agree. Like, but there are certain things you can know, right? Like, it's kind of like the same. There are certain things you can know, which is that the technology is intellectual in nature. The technology will eventually be self-referencing at the direction of humans. If it's intellectual in nature and it's self-referencing at the direction of humans, then it will improve itself and it will do so at a rate that will outpace human capacity to do so. Therefore, it will gain in its capacity to do intellectual labor at an exponential rate that outpaces humans. Now, all of that is like, unless you can find some flaw in that logic, we might say, well, how do we know that people will continue to direct it to do that? Maybe we'll shut it down. And it's like, that's possible, but highly unlikely if other people are still doing it, right? Like it's unlikely that like, Sweden and the US get together and go, we're going to stop this. If like other countries are like, have fun with that. We're going to keep doing it.
Or there's more limitations than we currently understand on its ability to self-improve.
Yeah, like there might be plateaus, just like Moore's law. For sure. I'm sure that there will be some limitations, some slowdowns, right? But it's difficult to conceive of those not being applied to efficiency. And so the other thing then is like, there might be a different way that we're not really good at conceptualizing now to solve that problem of the ability to understand, right? Like it might not require the brain chip, right? It might be, I don't know. Like there might be a system of explaining things. The AI might create, or we might create AI to understand AI, right? Like we might create AI systems that are able to very intelligently and quickly figure out what our needs and desires are and our misunderstandings and confusions based upon the words we use, so that you don't actually need a brain chip to immediately be like, oh, this is the answer you're looking for. This is how it works. Let me explain to you like you're a retard because you're a human. And then like explain it very quickly and you get it. And it's like, and if you want to fix this problem, just do this, right? Like it might be that the tools police the tools.
So, that is absolutely a path that this could go down. But like I'm thinking of like, because I had like a communications degree, like for my BA, and then I did IT for my master's. But I'm thinking of the of like conceptual models, right? Like language models that we've created. Like, so we have like these conceptual models that we've created for to explain like sociological phenomena, right? That like we didn't have this language to talk about this thing that we're observing, right? But like as we've taken more time to observe this phenomena, we build this language that helps us conceptualize and explain to others, right? And then we can all come to a consensus about the thing that's happening. And so,
like gender,
thinking of,
I mean, it's extremely
like,
messy, but like we
Yeah.
didn't really have a good, because I get this from conservatives and TERFs all the time where they're like, sex and gender are the same fucking thing. It's like, okay, well, no, they're fucking not. They're clearly describing two different things. We have different words. Well, Paul Mooney fucking liked to fucking let little kids fuck each other and put them on HRT, and he invented it. It's like, okay, cool. That guy's a fucking psycho. Like, that's not an argument against the concept of gender existing and there being like roles that people are expected to fill, and those roles being different from culture to culture, and that like it's like these things. We kind of always knew that they existed and we tied them together, right? But like our language evolved. And so like our conception of gender and things like that have evolved from that. And I think a lot of this has been bad, et cetera. I don't want to get into politics of it, but like, like that the concept of those things changed the way that we view those things. I mean, this is essentially the argument from Lacan, right? Which is the one of the big postmodernists, right? It's just his problem is that he was doing it with French, and like French is a shitty language compared to English.
No, we can all agree.
But it's just romance languages in general. They don't have that much explanatory power compared to English.
But so what I'm saying is that like I think we're at the start of a revolution, right? Like in like Sora, like if you are convinced previously, I think Sora should tell you that a revolution is happening right this second, and it's incredibly exciting. But like that we're at the start of the revolution, and so we don't actually know like have the language. It's like reading a newspaper about the internet, right? Like from like 20, 30 years ago, right? Like when they're like just like the language that they use and what they're focusing on is like completely wrong because they don't have this conceptual model yet.
It's like a series of tubes.
It's a series of tubes. And so I think that we are going to start developing that language and other ways for us to interpret this. Like consider like the lowly but like beautiful Venn diagram, right? Like think of like the world the day before the Venn diagram. And like how you compare things, right? Like the Venn diagram is so
trying to visualize overlap in Bayesian inferences, and you're doing the Bayesian inference completely in your head without a visualization for it. That is interesting. I do wonder. I think you have a good point there. I don't know how much power your point has. But I do agree, right? I do agree with you, right? That there's certainly a failure. Well, not a failure per se, just like something that's yet to be invented. Means by which we understand and speak with these things, and an ease of things. Like It's almost like when you look at Gen Z utilizing technology and boomers utilizing technology, right? And like the Gen Z, like they have a framework. Like if you attempt to teach them something completely new skill, a low IQ Gen Z person, a completely new skill on a completely new computer system, right? Like if I were to take a Gen Zer that had never used PC or had never used a Macintosh, right? Apple product, and they were of average intelligence, but they'd use PCs. And I was to try and get them to be fully able to do a job on Mac. And I was to do the same thing with a very intelligent boomer who'd never used a Mac, and then try and get them to use a Mac. I think you would very quickly see that it would take way more time training the intelligent boomer with a high IQ than the average intelligence Zoomer on how to use a new computer system. And that doesn't make sense. But there's a certain familiarity and understanding and conceptualization and almost a visualization and framework that is hard to explain, where the familiarity with just the idea of technology and how to navigate it is something that a Zoomer has that a boomer, I don't want to say completely lacks, because obviously they don't, right? But to the way that millennials and Gen Z do is like clearly deficient, or just not as much as. So I do wonder, as generations occur, as like familiarity with AI occurs, as language around it occurs, and as we start to utilize it in different and interesting ways, yeah, I do wonder if the language and even like an unspoken understanding begins to develop. Because like we still don't know Flynn effect, right? You know the Flynn effect?
No, I'm sorry. Nope.
So the Flynn effect is a concept that held true until very recently in Western societies with IQ, right? Which is that like every few years, 100 on the IQ scale has to be readjusted because the entire population just gets smarter. And people are like, oh, well, you know, it's nutrition. Well, it doesn't look like it's nutrition. Oh, well, it's it's because smarter people are breeding at high. Definitely not happening, right? Like low IQ people tend to have more children as they get access to resources. High IQ people tend to like save, invest, and wait to have children. They wait longer and longer, the more resource, right? So it's like all of the things that seem like we could explain the Flynn effect don't really make that much sense. And there was one explanation that seems to hold true, and it's technology. It seems like as human beings become more adapted to new technologies, for some reason that technology at a young age and our familiarity with televisions, radio, computer systems, iPads, and when I say technology, I mean all of the things that give cues, like turn signals on cars, right? That like a turn signal on a car affects a baby's brain in like a weird, unexplainable way that like signals the intent to turn left, that might actually trick their developmental brain in understanding telegraphing left from right, right? Like all of this interaction with visual cues and things like that seems to be having an effect on the brain development of humans and trains it in a way that we don't understand. Until recently, very recently in the West, IQ is actually falling. General IQ is we're actually becoming a little bit dumber.
Probably because of the rise of socialism. No, yeah.
I think it's probably diet, to be honest with you. I think it's ultra processed foods, like the green energy revolution, high fructose corn syrup, fucking all these lactins, xanthan gum, like the average
xanthan gum.
Right? Like the average American diet is like, I want to say it's like last time I checked, it's like over 70% ultra processed foods, right? Like if you look at a cheeseburger from McDonald's, it has like something like 84 ingredients. You know what I mean? Like when you break it down to its like I would say diet is probably the American diet is probably a big, and just Westerners diet, I think, is probably making us a little bit less efficient. That'd be my guess. But I wonder with AI, right? How does AI train? And what is 10 years from now AI systems of education for toddlers look like? Like right now we're training our kids on Coco Melon and kids shows, right? But what happens when AI is programmed with all of the available data plus a bunch more that we learn on developmental psychology, and is tasked with creating educational programs for toddlers that utilizes in real time what that specific individual toddler is learning, what's going to capture their attention, and what is the most effective way to teach them their numbers, their letters, their ability to speak, their ability to conceptualize directions, their ability to conceptualize on top of and bottom of, right? Like, there are a lot of unknown variables here where human beings might just become smarter because AI teaches us how to be smarter.
So there could be that, right? So I hear you on that. Like maybe they have like hyper lesson plans. So that could be a thing. But I liked the direction we were going previously and talking about the exposure, right? So there's going to be applications for these AI, right, that we are going to interact with directly. And like whoever it is, let's just pretend like it's on a smartphone, right? Something that we can wrap our hands around now. But there are some like next level AI program that's like become commonplace that the masses have, and the masses interact with it, and these kids are like playing around this AI, and that is the thing that stimulates itself. So not that it's like trying to teach us anything, right? But like you were saying before, like the left turn signal like tells you, oh yeah, there's like it is like starts introducing these symbols and these conceptual, and we start building slowly these conceptual frameworks around that, and that elevates us rather than it directly saying, here's how to efficiently like grow a human.
Yeah, it's just it is all guesswork, and we're coming to a point where like it's very strange because we live in a world where we know what happened when the printing press was invented. And when the printing press was invented, they didn't know what happens when the printing press was invented. Like they had no concept of how the printing press was likely going to cause the French Revolution. Like how the printing press was likely going to change the power imbalance between monarchies and nobles and the peasant class. Right? Now obviously there's a bunch of other factors, right? I don't want to say the printing press was like the only thing, but like we now know the deep impact that the printing press had, that the gatekeeping of knowledge went away. And like we've kind of seen a small version of that with social media. Actually, maybe even something close to it in social media. But we know the pattern and we know how those systems kind of work. And we know that what we're stepping into now is going to be exponentially more impactful than that. And it's hard to imagine what something that we know is going to be exponentially more impactful than the printing press is going to do to our current society. Like what the fuck? What's going to happen? I don't know. I hope it leads us towards cool shit, like liberty or something. I don't know. I'm afraid of what happens when governments control it. But I do wonder too, is like, I hope more than anything that it's Pandora's box, that it's too difficult for large corporations and governments to be able to use their limited power of the state to be able to rein in this technology and hoard it for the haves against the have-nots. I hope that it even if they try, it's so fast that what they did let out there, some nerd creates a competitor instantaneously that's just as good, right? Like it becomes like a game of whack-a-mole where they're trying to hoard and regulate AI systems, and like new people are just creating new ones every day. And so there's it's like impossible to keep track of. I hope for that because I think that would radically change, even if it doesn't go towards like my anarcho-capitalist, utopia or whatever, right? Like I think it would still radically change the power difference between the individual and small communities and large government organizations. And I can't imagine that being anything but a net positive.
Yeah.
If we don't kill ourselves.
That part's important. But yeah, so like the more I think about it, one, the thing that you just said, because you talked about like previously in our conversation, because I mentioned how like large corporations have these things because of the barrier of entry, the massive amount of resources, but you talked about like how even on smaller systems, like the amount of power that could give to an individual, right? When we have like chips that are specialized to do AI work, right? Even there, like there could be efficiency gains, in power, that
Right.
could be democratizing in and of itself. So like, I'm on board with that. Like the more I think about that, I'm on board with that. But also going back to my idea about these conceptual models, like the more I consider this, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. That we at the outlook we don't have enough information, we don't have the data points, and we don't have the experience, you and I or anyone else, not even the people working on it, to properly
Definitely not them, because they don't fucking understand people.
Exactly.
They're all fucking super autistic dudes that are obsessed with code.
But like we don't have it's we're blind men, like all touching different parts of the elephant at this point, right? And I think
right, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? Like the first person that fucking sees or gets something that we don't get.
I think that what needs to happen is that society is going to have a chance to step back from this and examine this from many different angles, and we'll figure out this conceptual model, right? To understand what we're dealing with, to understand like where are like the soft handles that we can grab one or two, and where are the sharp edges we should stay away from. And we don't have that now, and so we it's very scary. Whatever we're touching right now, it's very scary. But I think we just haven't developed those models, and once we do, like that'll change everything. That's when we're unlocking the real power.
I hope you're right. Right. I hope I'm also right in terms of like the inability for the government to regulate these things because of the technology itself just probably being too difficult for them to control. And I want a white pill. My problem with that is when I look in the past. And I look at the speed, the rate of which human culture changes, and the rate of which it holds on to baggage. And then I compare that to the presumed exponential rate of change of these technologies. I don't doubt that humans can develop the tools to better understand these things. What I doubt is that they can do it anywhere near fast enough compared to the speed at which these tools gain power in the ability to affect the real world. That's my problem, right? Like when I look at Sora popping up and going, holy shit, that's a big jump. And I know that the next big jump is going to be bigger and quicker. And I know the next one after that's going to be bigger and quicker and bigger and quicker. And then I look at how long it took humans to realize junk food's bad for you. How long it took us to realize that, like, I don't know, social media probably isn't something we should be letting our 13-year-old daughters have. And they still haven't figured that out, right? Like when I look at every kind of like cultural revolution and how it takes like a generation to die off before the next generation even has the power to be dominant in the culture, even if the next generation already gained the language and the understanding of these things. It's like, I agree with you that we will be able to figure this out. It's just like, do we kill ourselves before we figure it out? Because these things are so fucking powerful and they're so exponentially, and they're moving at a rate much faster than human culture changes. Or are we fundamentally wrong about sociology because we've only lived in the world before this? And what I mean by that is, if I take a structural functionalist perspective of sociology, right, we say, well, homelessness exists and it's existed for a long time. So the structural functionalist says, well, then homelessness must serve a purpose in our society. We don't know what it is, but there's a reason homelessness exists because there's some function that it's serving, right? Maybe it's a warning sign to everyone else and it makes everyone else more productive. Because maybe it's a Herrenvolk democracy kind of situation where those that are working their 9-to-5 slave job don't realize how bad their job is and how much they should, fight for more rights because they see the homeless person and go, well, at least I'm not like that loser, right? Like maybe homelessness exists because there's a certain subset of the population that never wants to work and that they enjoy. Like there's a billion explanations, right? But that's a premise of the structural functionalism, right? And the same thing is true with a lot of other sociological things like systems theory. There's this concept that like the Catholic Church affects the people and the people affect the Catholic Church, right? And so the Catholic Church adopts a bunch of Latin Americans, and then A bunch of Latin Americans affect the Catholic Church. Now the Catholic Church is much more open to Latin Americans. And then now my church has a bunch of, illegal and legal immigrants in it. Right? And now because I go to a church, because I've been Catholic my whole life, and I'm meeting all of these legal and illegal immigrants, and the Catholic Church is being so much more open to them, my ire and my racism or my feelings towards this demographic of people changes because the institution changed me, because I was a Catholic and I went to Catholic church, and I was kind of forced by nature of this institution to be with all of these people that I had negative feelings towards, and by being forced to be with all of these people, the institution and the people changed me. And now I am another person that disavows the racism against Latin American and Hispanic people, and I affect the Catholic Church to be even more anti-racist against Latinos because I am a part of the Catholic Church that also changed me. And so the question is if we take that systems theory perspective to AI, are humans as slow to move as we think, or does systems theory, is it more relevant than other forms of sociological lenses than we previously thought? And what I mean by that, explaining all of that to get to this point, is like, will culture and society and people change rapidly because the world changes rapidly? Mm-hmm. Will we very, very quickly deal, like ideas that throughout all of human history took generations to die off and took hundreds of years or 20 years to change? Will they change like fucking that because the way society moves is fucking that quick? Like the way human beings process things is, I have to wait fucking 60 seconds in this fucking line? What the fuck is wrong with this Starbucks that they can't get a goddamn coffee order done in 60 seconds? I'm going across the goddamn street. Jesus Christ, I had to walk 45 seconds to go over there, but at least the line was done in 10 seconds. I saved 5 seconds. Fucking losing me 5 seconds. Really 50 seconds. Fuck Starbucks for losing 50 seconds. Right? Like will our brains work in a totally new way?
So, okay. Well, let me work on this then, right? Because and it's something I want to bring up earlier in our conversation, but like there is lots of talk about Gen Alpha and their concentration levels, and people are like bringing it on technology and things like TikTok, right? And generally these things are looked at as a bad thing. And one of the things that people bring up is that like even in the space of a short ass fucking TikTok video, like the comments you'll see, like creators will get, it's like, hey, you like buried your point, get to it quickly, like front load this. And so I can like get the general point of this aside if I'm interested. Because why? Because the formulation of the app is that you're scrolling, you look at something for like 5 or 7 seconds. Is it interesting? If not, keep going, right? And so like if AI is in whatever applications that we're going to be actually interfacing with is giving this information to us faster, right? And we're like we're ruminating on concepts in a quicker manner, then maybe I can see the path you're talking about, right? Like it shapes us to go because we're just used to having this faster. Go ahead.
Yeah. And meanwhile, and I think it's more complicated than that. And this is something that cognitive psychologists, I think, are failing on, is they're so fucking focused on like attention span. Right. And one of the things I think is understudied is the growth in multitasking and attention span as it performs to multitasking. Because at the same time that TikTok and shorts are getting, YouTube shorts and things like, and Instagram reels are getting more and more popular as attention span gets less and less, long form content is getting more and more popular. It's like, well, how are these two things simultaneously true? And the thing that makes them simultaneously true is that long form content is when you're cutting the grass. It's when you're driving in your car. It's when your attention is split between multiple domains. And then they stop and they go, oh, that was an interesting thing. Let me sit and think about that for a second. And then they think about it and then they go back, right? Whereas short form content has all of your attention. And if you're going to capitalize all of my attention, you better fucking get to the point because I got better things to do. Right. And so these two things are happening simultaneously. We're losing attention span and we're gaining attention span at the same time. But the attention span for long form content is, of course, less meaningful because we're splitting our attention span. My greater fear with that is that we lose something when we gain something, that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Right. which is I've seen a trend, and this is, I don't want to get on like a socialism political rant because this conversation is kind of not trying to do that, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
in schools, for example, right? I've seen a growing trend, even in college with the McDonaldization of education system, where more and 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 more, it's you're taught what to think, you're taught to pass a test, you're taught to memorize data, you're taught all of these things, you're not taught how to think. And worse and worse and worse with this attention span is give me the 3 facts. Well, facts are meaningless by themselves, right? Facts actually don't mean anything if you don't know how to think, right? So I'll give you some facts. Black people are 12.5% of the population. That's a fact. Black people commit 27% of violent crime in the United States. That's a fact. Black people make up 26% of police interactions. So an action between a police officer and a community member, 1% less than the violent crime that they actually commit. Black people statistically are slightly less likely to be killed by police. Black people make up 61% of the incarceration rate, despite only committing 27% of crimes. Each of these facts by themselves tell a story. They tell a narrative. If I tell you one of those facts, like 61% of the incarceration rate compared to the crime rate, all of a sudden, what the fuck? Our legal system is the most racist, fucked up thing ever, more than double. But then if I add a fact, right, which is that most of these things go away once you control for poverty and once you control for secondary offenses and once you control for individuals that are repeat offenders, that most of these things go away, and then there's actually a slight difference. Well, you still might come across this concept that it's racist, but nowhere near as you did before, right? And if I tell you that blacks are less likely to be shot by police officers, slightly, statistically speaking, all of a sudden that tells a narrative, right? But then it also tells a narrative that they're 27% of police interactions. It's like, well, how many crimes exist that are nonviolent crimes where cops are just going into fucking neighborhoods looking for fucking black people, and all of a sudden problems and shootings and things like that exist that aren't necessarily proportionate to the crime being committed, but they're proportionate to how much the police decide to fucking be in the community and decide to pull somebody over at 2:00 in the morning because they don't like a car and they don't like your skin, right? Like each fact tells a different story. And I worry the more we lose attention span and the more we start to think like computers and stop thinking like humans, is that we start to lose philosophy and we start to lose some of our rational or critical thinking skills in lieu of a multitude of statistics and facts that have a narrative of their own that aren't necessarily, that we kind of pick and choose based upon our bias or fed to us based upon algorithms manipulated by companies. And, or just algorithms, manipulated by for our own desires, right? At furthering echo chambers. So like that is, I do think we're going to change the way we think. And I think it's going to come with some good things, but I also think it's going to come with some bad things. I think we're going to learn, a lot of us are going to lose how to think.
So I'm like considering like our past
Purely hypothetical, right?
Yeah. But like, so as a person who has dealt with like IT, right? Like how people interface with technologies, like this talking about people like losing the ability to think. Now I wouldn't say it in those words, but I see individuals who like at some point like turn their brains off. I'm not sure the best way how I want to express this thought, right? But like I and especially happens in my presence, right? Like if you're a help desk in your presence, like you'll see a person who like previously like has used a fucking smartphone, right? Has installed a program previously, right? And like what do? You click next, and then finish, right? But then sitting next to me, right? I click next. What should I do now? You should probably click next again. It's telling me like to put my name in. Should I put my name in? You should put your name in. Like I swear to you, this is the conversation I've had with people.
Oh yeah, no, for
many
sure.
times, right?
Yeah. Once they have a guide, their brain cuts off, and they lose some sense of common sense. But it's a defense mechanism, and it's not necessarily a bad heuristic, because like you already fucked it up, so you tell me everything, right? Because then it's your fault. And like no matter if I start doing shit without you, you might get mad at me. Like I'm gonna be obstinate, but it's actually not even. I don't even know if it's intentional for a lot of people. Like they're just like, okay, it's fucking in your hands now.
No, possibly. Yeah, fair enough. But in any case, like so let me put that aside for a second. And another part of IT, right? And I was just talking to Zonia, and Zonia's great. She's been in the business much longer than I have, and she's like extremely knowledgeable. But anyway, we were just having a conversation last night. She was talking about like what the IT business looked like for her, and she's significantly older than me, and like how she was on like the cutting edge, like the technologies that that IT people take for granted now, right? And this ability to information share simply wasn't there. And she was like actually like before there was documentation for these things, she was like figuring it out, right? But on my end, when I was figuring things out for IT, I Googled it, right? Like I Googled it, and then there's like Stack Overflow, right?
Right.
And
yeah.
And now you can say that this makes me like less smart or whatever, but like all of a sudden I'm accessing like this like wealth of like consensus knowledge. And then I've solved the problem that I had. Now, did I turn my brain off? Could I have figured this out by myself? I like to think so, that I could have, right? But like for what particular purpose? Is it just are we talking about efficiency gains for people's minds as well, right? Rather than like which we're saying that people are might turn their brains off, and as we get more computer like, or are we talking about like efficiency gains? You know, like
so right, yeah. So I mean, like what I mean to say is that there's a trade off for everything gained, right? That like the human brain isn't like, it's not like a movie where we're only using 10% of our brain. You know what I mean? Like when we focus on learning one thing, we must inevitably lose focus on learning another thing. And so what we tend to do is over time, we let me find this PDF. Sorry, 1 second. What we tend to do over time is we grab the most efficient things, right? Now, obviously, you know, it doesn't always work, right? Like obviously, like there are mistakes, et cetera, as society grows, et cetera. But like over time, you know, we will get more efficient, at least as the market, or efficient in the world that we live in, right? But there's no doubt that something is lost in the process. And so when I try and understand what is gained and what is lost with attention span, and I try and look at the relevant data that we have, and I try and look at it historically, what it appears like to me is, I think my argument still holds, that I think what seems to be the most likely is that we will gain an ability to quickly demand information to solve everyday problems and data, and information that tells a narrative in a short way, right? As we demand things be quicker, then we need data that tells a narrative. Why would we need data that tells a narrative? Because when data tells a narrative, it's quicker. It's quicker than giving a story, right? Like if I tell you a passionate story about racism, that will never be as quick as one of those statistics is. The statistics says so much more, right, in a shorter period of time than the story does, but the story has its own value, because as we process it, as we humanize it, as we empathize with it, we gain that experience. It's like I told you before, the very beginning when I talked about the I have arrived. There's a difference between knowing something intellectually and then sitting and mulling in that experience and knowing. And also, there's a difference between being able to solve a problem and then knowing the process by which problems are solved, like the thinking that goes behind it, right? And just to prove a point about like how society has changed, in America, throughout all of American history, right? There's a list of books that are the most read books in America, right? Per capita. So obviously, as population grows, the most read book will be popular books like that are out now, as opposed to in the past. But if you do it by per capita, like percentage wise, number one is the Bible, right? Obviously. Number two is Thomas Paine's Common Sense, right? At right before the Revolutionary War, you were not a fucking American. You were not an American man if you hadn't read Thomas Paine's Common Sense. Everyone had read this book. It was as well read as a fully Christian society having read the Bible, right? Like everybody knew this and could quote this book. Now I'm going to read, and I had this quote memorized, but I'm going to read it anyways just because I might fuck it up, right? I'm going to read the first paragraph of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And then you think about how many Americans today would even begin to fucking understand this. Perhaps the sentiments contained in the following pages are not yet sufficiently fashionable to procure them general favor. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right and raises at first a formidable outcry in the defense of custom. But the tumult soon subsides. Time makes more converts than reason. That opening line is super powerful and poetic and important, and it says a lot. Your average American today reads below a seventh grade reading level. I'm not saying we're becoming dumber. What I'm saying, right? My argument isn't that we're becoming dumber. My argument is the fact that we've become much smarter than these people. So how can we be much smarter than these people? That we're able to read and write at a level way beyond us. It's because we know all kinds of different other shit that's functional in our life, but you have to lose something to gain something. And what we've lost is really good literacy rates. What we've gained is like the ability to Google and function things and solve problems quickly or operate motor vehicles, right? Or like change your oil in your car, like all these other things.
So I understand where you're going with this. I get your general direction, but when it comes to literacy rates, I would look at in other places as to why literacy rates are falling, right? Like, is it because of like the incentives that are inherent in teaching and the limitations that we have? One of in our communities to support learning for our children, right? Like how our community, like depending on which community you come from, like whether they support you in that effort, whether it's looked down upon.
Right. Like comparing Asian and Jews, right? Like where like despite whatever fucking poverty, there's a strong cultural bias towards literacy, especially with Jews. Right.
I get what you're
saying.
Rather than like looking at there's so much that's lost looking at the American population as a whole when we're talking about literacy rates, right? And if we narrow it down, I think more useful data will come out of that.
I'm not making.
I hear your general.
My general argument isn't necessarily like that there aren't problems, and it's like I get all that. I'm just saying that like human beings have focus and they learn things, and like what we focus and learn things on, as a culture, as a society, as technology increases, changes, right? Like there's this like knowledge sometimes can be useless. And then weirdly enough, it becomes useful. So like I've seen so many of these memes for years about like all these people wasting all their time playing video games. And then they were like, oh, and then like there started coming out like these drone pilots and like the military was like, we have to get young guys that play Call of Duty because apparently they're fucking amazing at piloting drones. And it was like, oh, it was still a meme because like cool, you're going to be one of like 15 people that are drone pilots working at like a German base. But meanwhile, like, 80% of middle schoolers are playing too many goddamn video games. It's not going to be you. You're not going to be an esports player, et cetera, right? Even though some of them are. And then what's interesting is as technology changes, and it changes based off of our desires, but sometimes it changes based off of our skill set. And so one of the things that I've seen is like a lot of advertising companies, right? Hiring like it's almost always like a young Korean guy or something, right? Like, because no matter what you do, like there's always an Asian that's better than you, you know what I mean? Right. But like, there's always like some young dude that's like doing these crazy drone pilot things to like do these circular camera shots of like a nightclub and then draw, zoom out and zoom back in and go over like dancing in the center and then drive over the bar. And like they have it timed so that like a drink is done. And then they're like, whoo, we did it. We didn't break the drone, right? And it's like, that's our commercial. You know what I mean? Like things, wow. You know what I mean? So like the technology sometimes will evolve based upon the skills that we gain because there's a market of like
I hear what you're saying.
Because a bunch of people can do this thing. And so because a bunch of people can do this thing, it's cheaper to find people that can do this thing. And so that becomes less valuable because we do more of it in society. And because it's less valuable, that means I can make more money off of it because I can pay you less, right? Like, and so it'd be, I don't know. There's so many factors at play here. I still think that's a skill we've gained. But to practice that skill, something else was sacrificed in order to do that. There's a give and take relationship. That's my argument.
I hear what you're saying. And I like the what you were talking about in terms of like technology molding, especially to the society at the time, right? Even like the pre-existing society, that their humans were doing a thing, right? There was these different subcultures and interests that humans were doing, and then a new technology comes along, and we're trying to wrap our hands around it and figure out its applications. It turns out like this one subculture like happens to work well with like one of our initial applications, and then because of that, well, since there's so much interest in that, and there's a workforce that can actually utilize it in that way, then that's the direction. There's a lot of effort, a lot of money going into maximizing the efficiency for that line of technology, right? But when like if video games had not existed, using that example previously, if video games had not existed, then we would have gone down the drone pilot route if like we can't find people who are really good at it.
But like, but how often, probably, but if video games never existed, assuming drones did exist and video games didn't for whatever reason, right? You probably would use drones less, right? Like they'd be less, right? Like it would be more expensive to find somebody that could pilot a drone. Yeah. And so you wouldn't use it for you'd use a crane like they were doing before, because a crane would be cheaper than hiring a drone pilot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying like because there's less efficiency there, like is that the direction we go, or do we use technology in a different way, right? That better conforms with the labor force that we have available, right? And then investment goes in that direction.
But back to my original argument, my original fear is that like I am indeed white-pilled in a lot of the same ways that you are. I worry about the speed of growth. And the other thing that I worry about is I do think that Gen Z and Gen Alpha especially are going to be trained to use these things in this new world, and they're going to think differently than we do. And one of my fears that I see plenty of evidence to suggest is that the way that they think differently, apart from like being groomed by culture and social media, et cetera, into political ideologies that I don't like, setting that aside, is that they don't think. And I'm not trying to be insulting to them. I'm really not. I'm not trying to be, I'm trying to be realistic and view this as real as I can, is that they don't think things through. They don't think about the logical consequences of the thing that they say. They don't think about like how data was obtained, or like what may or may not be missing from a data set, because like what isn't measured is often more important than what is measured when you read about something or read a study, right? It's like because that sometimes can be even more so. It's like, why wasn't this controlled for, right? Or why wasn't this measured? Like this changes everything, right? And sometimes it can be the answer to everything is determining what wasn't measured. I've talked about that for as an example, corporal punishment. Right. I'm a believer in peaceful parenting. All of the data shows that if you beat your kids, it leads to all of these, terrible outcomes. Right. And yet what isn't measured in almost all of these studies is, are you hitting your kid out of anger and frustration, or are you hitting your kid in a controlled environment where you don't lose your cool, and it becomes a ritualized punishment where it's like, pull down your pants. Okay, we're hitting your bum. Okay, these things are not differentiated. And so it's like, are we actually measuring the effect of corporal punishment, or are we measuring the effect of parents who lose control and have temper and have issues controlling their temper to the point that it's so bad that they end up hitting their kids? Because obviously those are bad parents, right? That's just one of like a billion examples, right?
Yeah.
But it's like sometimes it's like what we're not studying. And so like all of these things are things that the demand for instant information, as opposed to ruminating on information and, thinking about the information and pulling apart information, you lose those things. I think you lose those things the more short form. And yet a Gen Alpha, Gen Z person might grow up to know, maybe not think as well as someone else, but to know in their brain 20, 30 times more things that can become important. Because if I know a thing, then I can go, that sounds like bullshit. I know a thing. Then because I know a thing, I Google a thing, or I ask ChatGPT a thing. And now I can fucking destroy your entire argument because I knew a thing that led me to all of the other things that I needed in this moment. And I utilized the technology to show you why you're wrong. They're two different skill sets for two different worlds. And they're both equally important, I think. And I worry that we might lose too much of one for the other as the world changes.
Yeah. So just on that, because this like relates to a few things that I've been watching. Uh, like, so there's a bunch of teachers who there's like a trend on TikTok, right, talking about what Gen Alpha is looking like in terms of their educational achievements. And so there is like a big reading in terms, we're going back to literacy, like there's a big deficit there, right? Like a noticeable one.
Well,
and
to be fair, a lot of that was COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. But there was also a thought that this, like, there would be steady improvements in closing that gap. But they're saying that that's not happening right now. This is all anecdotal. There is some research in this direction, but like we don't have.
It's hard to
time to get
it's hard to research outcomes until you get the outcomes.
Exactly that. Right. So
it's impossible, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
what are the long-term outcomes? Well, I'll know in 20 years.
So we're working on that. But part of the things that people were talking about. So there's literacy, right? But there's also like reading literacy. But there's also computer literacy. So I was watching a video on this, and saying that like Gen Alpha, like doesn't know how to use like a PC, like a mouse and keyboard, and doesn't know how to Google things. That less and less of them are using that computers in that way. Instead, they are more adept at using apps, right, on phones, because that's what they've been using, right? So especially in our society with the digital divide, right, internet divide, where like to access the internet, it's going to be through a smartphone. For a lot of people that they just don't have the internet otherwise in their house, right? Like that has caused like these people have a different level of skill set, and there's a lot of panic around this, right? So I don't think it's a particularly good thing myself that they don't have this particular skill. But I think back to my childhood where in terms of my ability to write, like I have like really sloppy handwriting, right? I don't think it's the fucking worst, but like this was made like a
Right.
big fucking deal when I was a kid, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just not neat. Like it's a big fucking deal. And
It was this huge problem, and then it's like now your handwriting doesn't fucking matter.
It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't fucking matter. But going back, like tell that to my
it can a little bit,
grade,
but nowhere near like
it doesn't matter at all. I can tell you in my life, it doesn't matter at all. And going back and telling that to my 7th grade teacher, like would she probably like to understand? Like I mean, she knew what a computer was, obviously, right? But like probably we understand like the proliferation that was going to happen. No, but she like sure as hell like to shame me about this. And my aunt sure as hell like to shame me about this. So relating it back to all this, so there's a skill, right, in terms of using a PC and like office apps and stuff like that these kids don't seem to be have right now, right? They don't have a conceptualization of that. But could it be that we are entering a new age where that doesn't matter? That in 20 years, that's not that that they aren't using these PCs. Like they don't have the computer literacy in the way that we consider people to be computer literate, right? PC literate, I'll say, right? That maybe that doesn't matter. And society is changing in a fundamental way where there's like a new set of skills that we don't have, that we don't even need maybe at this point in time because society hasn't made that change. But by the time they get there, they'll be looking back. It's like, yeah, like I remember my parents used to like complain about me.
There's a paradox that exists within education, right? Which is like, and you're describing it, with literacy and computer literacy. It's like maybe in the future everything will be swipe. There will be no like the keyboard mouse interface is like not it's a vestige of a bunch of older people that are maintaining something that they're comfortable with is the only reason it really works, because it's not as effective as like swiping and like zoom and zoom in and zoom out, which I don't buy, but I get, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like, but maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe if we were Gen Alpha,
and one more thing, but like it's also one thing we add to that is that also like going back to the market for a moment, right? Like you're having these this cohort of people who are growing up, and that's their specialty, right? And to appeal to that market, right? What will be how technology will go, what's going to be invested in are things that work in that vein, right? So like it works within the conceptualization of an app, because that's what that up and coming market, that profitable market, will be, geared towards. But go ahead, yeah.
No, I agree with all those things. The paradoxical issue here is like when I was a kid, same kind of situation, right? Where it's like your teacher would be like, "Oh, you have to learn all of this because it's not like you're going to have a calculator with you everywhere you go." Right. And it's like, well, it turns out we all have a calculator with us everywhere we go. It turns out we didn't need to know any of this at all. Right. But the problem is that somebody unknown in that classroom was going to grow up to be a mathematician. Right. Somebody unknown in that classroom was actually going to need to genuinely understand every single building block up to that point so that their genius could be realized in making the lives better for everyone else. And so the question as AI comes forward is AI starts to do these things for us, but as we understand less and less, do we then actually leave human genius behind? Because if you start to get into the domain of things humans don't understand, but might have been able to understand if they were given all the building blocks up to this point throughout their entire life, throughout their entire growing up experience, right? Then they might have been able to innovate in creative and useful ways that other systems in AI wouldn't, right? So it's like I agree that like there's a paradox here. There's like a push pull here where it's like for most of these kids, basic arithmetic is all you're ever going to need, right? For most of these kids, good handwriting is so fucking unnecessary. And yet we don't know. And we don't know who amongst them is going to need good handwriting. Or for all we fucking know, the world ends, right? And computers blow up and it's like, we have to go back to writing and like all these kids can't write. I mean, I don't know about all that, but you get what I'm saying? Like maybe not handwriting is not necessarily a great example, but like literacy might be, right? Like if we keep fucking losing on literacy, how many great authors and poets and you know what I mean? And stories and narratives are we destroying because there will never again be another Fyodor Dostoevsky. There'll never again be another Tolstoy, right? I won't say they're never, but like we're losing those people by our illiteracy.
Yeah. Okay. But so I guess, I mean, baked into your premise is that people will know less, right? Or think less. And I guess I'm more focusing on them thinking differently. And that like, and wherever that takes us, like there is knowledge, there are discoveries, and there are pathways that'll be open up to them that again you and I, because we're in the old paradigm, like can't see, maybe can't appreciate, right? And beyond that, like maybe the next Tolstoy, just I don't know that guy's name. I never
Dostoevsky. Yeah.
But maybe the next person, he produces a work of art, right? That
it's
is
just
a
different,
new type. Yeah, it's a different thing.
Well,
It's as touching, it's as meaningful to the people who intake that art, but like it's something brand new and something Dostoevsky could never have produced himself.
For sure. I guess what I'm arguing is like, so there's this concept that Vygotsky came up with called scaffolding, right? It's a pretty simple, we take it for granted now, but we had to discover it at some point, right? Which is basically like, you know, you don't teach your kid how to clean their room, right? You teach your kid, this is a toy box, right? And then eventually you teach your kid to put toys in a toy box, right? And then eventually you teach your kid, put all your toys in the toy box. Teach your kid the step-by-step process to, right? So you treat, there's this, what goes along with scaffolding is the zone of proximal development, right? This is this area where our knowledge is stretched to its limitation, right? And we have to get into that zone where like we can operate, but it's kind of difficult and we have to work at it. And then that's where you learn, right? Because you don't learn, right? It's like you don't get good at a video game by only playing on easy, right? You get good at a video game by playing on hard. And then like easy becomes like hilariously easy later because you played it on hard, right? You played at the you did it at the edge of your development. And so what this means is that many tasks, in order for tasks that we think are useful for society to exist, we have to predict the future in terms of education, in the sense that we have to do these building blocks of a step ladder in order to create people that are capable of doing those things in the future. So I absolutely agree that like things will change, and then we will fuck up and we will teach the wrong things based off of old systems. And yet literacy is fucking important, right? Like an understanding of language, because language is directly correlated to thought, and thought's important. And that's what I'm worried we're losing.
Yeah. So that part, I combined those two things, and that's a bit of a problem because I 100% agree on literacy in of itself. Like that's like a separate problem. I'm more focused on like computer literacy.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Losing that part. Yeah. But yeah, literacy in itself, no, that's a pernicious problem. And that's not being, it's not like with computer literacy, that's being replaced with like app literacy. And how to like interact with like through a smartphone, through touchscreen technology. But lack of reading literacy, no, that's like a deficiency within our ability to deliver this knowledge, or like because of the COVID situation or something, right? There's like a great disruption that's happening.
Yeah, there's a
and
bunch
that's
of
just
factors,
a purely negative thing. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, COVID was particularly pernicious, not just because it took children out of schools, but because of masking. Masking wasn't that big of a deal to adults because it just meant we had to breathe through shitty paper. It was a compliance thing, you know, there was liberty involved, et cetera. And, you know, all political issues aside, the danger of wearing a mask was essentially non-existent, right? Right. Other than just, it was a convenience thing. And then like a fuck you, don't tell me what to do. And also, you know, like a efficacy thing. But for children, especially Gen Alpha, like it turns out it's really fucking important that we see people speaking as we develop. It's really fucking important that we watch lips move. That helps us increase our vocabulary. It helps us create really important social skills. It turns out that eyes aren't the only thing involved when we're learning social skills and communication, that lip quivers and how wide someone opens their mouth, whether or not they're smiling or scowling, that facial expressions are really fucking important towards being able to facilitate a relationship between others and peers and develop social skills, but also between teacher and student. It's more difficult to understand someone behind a muffled mask where you can't see their face. And so it was an extremely negative impact on their ability to learn anything. And we didn't really realize, I don't think we realized how bad it was until now. Like we're seeing like, oh, this fucked those kids up. Just how important it is to see someone's face move, see their facial expressions when you're engaging human to human so that you can understand, oh, I messed up or I didn't go far. She's kind of mad. All these subtle communications that are subconscious that we kind of take for granted, it turns out are super fucking important for education. Especially for language, because there's the added thing that I need to see your mouth moving, right? For proper pronunciation of words. And it makes it easier, it makes it quicker for me to learn new words, etc. So that's kind of a special thing. But even still, literacy rates have been falling in America every fucking year since like the 1980s. Right?
I would.
You can piece that data apart and talk about specific communities all you want. That's fine, right? But I just mean in general, like that's a trend that's been occurring.
But like, is that? Yeah, and is that like replicated in other nations, right? Like in other industrialized nations, is that the case?
It appears to be the case in all Western nations, with the exception of like really low birth rate places and like the Nordic model, right? So it doesn't appear to be that like it's happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. It's way more extreme in like the UK, the US, Canada, you know, France, Germany, etc. And to a much lesser degree in places like Japan, you know, Sweden, Norway, etc. Like this is occurring more in countries that are more diverse, and you know, have more issues between different communities, etc. Right? Because I think you see that when you parse about the data, right? Like the fall in literacy rate is much more prominent in the Black community in America, right, than anywhere else. I don't know this, but I presume based off of looking at a lot of other similar studies and data, like health insurance costs, life expectancy, all these other things. If you took out the Black community, we would probably be on par with like Japan and Norway, right? That is really that it's worse in that community for one reason or another.
Yeah, and
this is true with a bunch of shit in America, like I said.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think. Well, you know, I'll leave it there because that's a entirely different conversation. Because I have thoughts on that as well.
Data, like I said before, right, with Gen Alpha and Gen Z, data tells a story. It has a narrative associated with it almost immediately, right? And it's people like you and me that appreciate looking at that data and then trying to not just let the story tell a story. Instead, trying to actually contextualize that data and take a lens or a framework to understanding that data and add other bits of data, right? I worry that the short attention span growth just looks at that data, just looks at the story that it tells. And
oh, we'll see. All right. I think I'll have to let you go here.
Yeah, I got to
friend.
get some food.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but this was like a lot of fun. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, no, I enjoy one-on-one conversations, and I enjoy talking about AI as well. I want to find somebody that like
Yeah.
really knows their shit on AI. Like, but those people are so secretive. Like, those are not people that are easy to get interviews with unless you're like Joe Rogan or something, right? Like, you can get a conversation with people that work on any number of things as like a small YouTuber, but like talking to somebody that like works on this shit, they're like they're not public about that. They keep themselves and their
I
family secret.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I know one of those people in particular, but like, they have like been like pretty mum on their discussions. Maybe they'd have a conversation with you if like they weren't going to be recorded specifically. But like I've
I
tried
would
to
never trust
engage
that
them
shit.
on
Yeah.
yeah on AI topics, and they're like, well, no, I'm actually literally working on this, and so I don't want to have a discussion on it. Um,
Well, also they probably have NDAs. A lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's more than that. Like, also, like, he didn't want to like damage, like be even close to damaging the reputation of
Mm-hmm.
like the company, because we were talking about the dangers of AI, right? And like, so he doesn't want to have any association with those types of conversations. So, and this person's otherwise quite opinionated. Um, so I don't know. Yeah,
Hold
that's
on.
it's difficult.
There's going to be, I'm going to see you later. Good night. Have a great time. And you know what else? There's going to be some whistleblowers soon. In the next 5
Oh,
or
yeah.
6 years, there's going to be like some guys like, I worked at Google. I worked at what is that Google thing? Oh God, the original one, DeepMind. Like, I worked at DeepMind. Here's the things they're not telling you. Like, I can't wait for that. It's going to be riveting drama and scary as
the
fuck.
congressional investigation, right? So like,
Yeah, like Ted Cruz, like grilling them and being like, "Did you or did you not search people's addresses?" And you're like, what? No, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Answer the question. You're dodging, and we all know why. Like, I can't wait for that shit show and the fear and the drama of like AI researcher fucking whistleblowers that are guaranteed to come out in the future.
do you remember there was I forget exactly how it went, but there was like a congressional meeting, right? Investigation panel. And they brought in these technology heads, and one guy put up his phone. He was talking about like he's got like an iPhone, and like you've messed up my iPhone. And it was like a guy from Facebook.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like you've made like a few category errors here. I don't know how to like disentangle.
On the opposite end of that, real quick before we go, on the opposite end of that, there's okay, I can't remember. He just had a Netflix special. I can't remember the guy's name. I apologize. White guy. He's got long hair. He's a little bit fatter than he used to be. Funny. But he has a bit where he just is in the audience and he's like talking about shit. And then he just like, like we deserve all of the things the Illuminati are doing or something. He's joking. And then he goes, yeah, he's like, hold on one second. I want to buy a dildo. I want to buy a giant dildo. And he just goes, shush. I want to buy a veiny dildo. I want to buy this. And he's like, kept saying like a specific thing over and over again. And then he just goes, enjoy those Instagram ads, everybody. And it's like there's the opposite end of that where you're like, fuck, that worked. Like, we all know that we're living in a little bit of a dystopian world. We all know that if you scream the thing loud enough, it's going to be an Instagram ad. Like, you're definitely going to get an Instagram ad for the thing you said too many times. And it's like, so it's like at the same time that we're all like, none of that's happening, we all kind of accept and know that they're all lying through their fucking teeth and doing all of this shady shit too. And it's like, what are they doing? Who fucking knows? But I guess I'll just trust them to make our new gods. That'll be fun.
All right, buddy. Have a good one, friend.